Yeah, it started. I want to ask one question particularly, like, why do you think you can communicate or like talk about so many topics? Is it because of your age or the experience, or you are like curious enough to know about topics, or you just want to talk and like talk about the topics you have seen or like you have studied, if
So
you're getting me?
that's an
Yeah.
interesting question. I think the best way I can answer that is so, okay, I studied in the CBSE system, right? And anyone who's been in CBSE knows that there is, a sort of attention given to extracurricular activities. Now, normally in schools within India, extracurricular activities are treated exactly as they are extracurricular. That is to say, it's an optional add on thing that you do on top of your studies. But I was lucky in the sense that I had teachers who insisted that you should participate in these sort of things because it improves your communication skills. Now, growing up in the 90s, we didn't have a lot of information about a lot of things. The internet, as we know it,
Where did
didn't
you grow
exist.
up,
I grew
basically?
up in Saudi Arabia, so I was born in India in Nagpur. And
Okay.
when I was about 5 years old, my dad he left his job in the Indian Railways, and he moved to Saudi Arabia to be a specialist pathologist there. And
Okay.
so the entire family was moved there. I lived in Jeddah initially, and used to go to the International Indian School there. It used to be called the Indian Embassy School back in the day. And that building, the cornerstone, it was actually inaugurated by Indira Gandhi, I think. Like she came there, and like we had that stone or whatever. But of course, that was years and years and years ago. But the nice thing about that school was that we had a lot of importance placed on extracurricular activities. So I remember the first time I ever participated. It was an elocution competition, and so I was probably in the fourth
Elocution.
grade. Yeah.
Okay, what does it mean?
So elocution is essentially, you give a speech, and like they judge you on the basis of your speech, your vocal range, the way you communicated that, and of course the content of your speech as well. And the
Okay,
topic
okay.
was unity in diversity, right? And my dad obviously helped me write it. And this competition was meant to be like fourth graders, fifth graders, sixth graders, eighth graders, ninth and 12th graders. And what happened was when they actually looked at everyone's submissions, they decided to cancel out everyone below the sixth grade, but they let me participate because they really liked my speech, and like they had a trial speech in class, and the teacher liked it. And I went in and I competed against eighth graders, 12th graders, whatever, and I won first place. So that
Okay.
gave me my first taste of what this is. I didn't quite understand what I was saying, but I understood that there is value to this. And then going forward, I decided to participate in as many things as I possibly could. And so it taught me a lot, right? Like the first thing it taught me was how to take defeat, right? You're not going to win everything. The other thing it taught me was, how to communicate, how to grab people's attention and hold it so that I can get an idea across. Now, as far as the diverse range
What?
of topics,
Yeah. Sorry for disturbing. Were you able to like grasp the attention beforehand, or with this competition you realized it, or like you then build on it?
so as part of preparing for the competition, my dad, he put on TV a bunch of interesting politicians of that time, and he would say, "Look at how this guy is talking. Look at his mannerisms. Look at, like one of the most famous ones is this. Do you know who used to do this every time he was speaking? Bill Clinton."
Okay.
Right? And my dad, he used to like Bill Clinton back in the day, and he's like, try and do this, when you're trying to make a point. And so I found that gesticulation, like grabbing people's attention. But then the other thing was also listening to other people as they presented, and I would, just sort of feel like, how interested am I in this guy, in what this person is saying? And after a while, I realized that people like to follow a formula. So they see someone say or do something, and then they try and mimic that. And one of the worst, I think, things that we do to our children is teach them a very sing-song way of speaking, or we fail to tell them that you shouldn't be monotonous. You need to have a bit of range in your voice so that you're grabbing the neuronal attention of the other person who's listening to you. And so that
yeah,
really helped. But the other aspect of it was also understanding that you're not going to win every single thing, you're not going to win every single time, and the most important thing is to have fun. And so that's basically what I focus on, and I try to be myself. Now, with respect to the other part of your question, which was the diversity of topics, that's just because I'm a super nerd, right? Like, I love
yeah,
knowing about things. I love understanding how things work, and I love dissecting those things. So, you show me a new piece of technology and you go, "What do you think of this?" So I will observe it. Like, I'll just watch you do things with it. Then I will see what output it's producing. I'll see what inputs it's taking, and then I'll come up with a hypothesis, and I'll tell you that I think it works like this, and that. Now, if you're an expert in that, you can tell me if I'm correct, if I'm close, if I'm wrong, if I'm not. And so what that does is, over time, you start to develop a gut feel for things, right? You start to
yeah,
develop a feeling for whatever it is, that whatever information is being conveyed to you. And so, as a person, I decided that, I'm going to be on the side of rationality. I'm going to be on the side of science. I understand what the evils of superstitious, magical thinking could be. And I took these sort of lessons to heart, right? I took the fact that I spoke about unity and diversity, and then understanding later on, what does that actually mean in the context of India? And of course, like, I share my birthday as a complete matter of chance with the person, the architect of the Indian Constitution. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, I was born on the same day, and in Nagpur. So you can imagine that when I moved back to India, and I would tell people, "Oh yeah, it's my birthday as well today," and they'd be like, "No, I don't believe you." And I'd end up showing them my ID, like, "Look, it really is, literally is my birthday." And so
yeah,
someone gave me a whole bunch of books on Dr. Ambedkar, and I felt really inspired. And I think, like, wow, we had such an incredible person in our country, and whatever they've come up with, it's, you might agree with a lot of it, you might disagree with a bunch of it,
yeah,
but the reality is that our constitution gave us the ability to be individuals, right? To have that freedom and individuality and all of those things, and we were on a good trajectory, and then we suddenly fell off a cliff. So, like, that's essentially where my passion comes from. And when it comes to technology, when it comes to mechanical stuff, I fear nothing. Like, I will literally take anything apart. It's a different story if I can put it together again, but I want to
yeah.
satisfy that curiosity. I want to see how it works. I want
Or
to
you,
test it.
if you even want to, like, put it back.
I do, most of the times. But I took apart a pocket watch a few
Okay,
months ago, and I lost interest halfway. So it's still sitting inside an ultrasonic cleaner. I'll get to it at some point.
okay, okay. Yeah, talking about curiosity regarding opening things and looking how things work. I have, like, on my birthdays I used to get a remote control car. I mean, it's
Hmm.
the basic thing which you get in India these days. Like then, but like in a week or so, I would play with it however I want. Then I would used to open it, and I used to open it till a point that it can't be even like put back together. Like even opening the motors and like seeing how
Yeah.
magnets work and like how it is, and like doing it for very much years, I did develop a intuitive sense of how things work. And like I always thought, how does a car engine work basically? And before seeing the actual inside car pictures in the magazines, and then I did sort of develop a theory that it does revolve around like burning the petrol and uh, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, I can see you and hear you. You're good.
Yeah, yeah. So like burning the petrol or the fuel, and then with a bang it used to move.
Yeah.
And then I worked on the theory in my subconscious, and after a while I did uh, think about how it syncs with the other pistons and that. And then I saw the photos, and then I got to know that it is actually this. And then the spark plugs which they ignite the fuel, and the valves which used to like inject the fuel and take out the gases. So I mean, it is a very interesting thing how curiosity can shape your ideas and can help you think intuitively. And
Absolutely.
it is right, actually, if you do think about it.
Yeah, so very similar to you as well. Like my parents had to beg me to stop taking apart all of my toys because I'd insist that they get me something, and then I'd play with it for a week or so, and then I'd invariably end up taking it apart and not really understanding, like, okay, so there's a bunch of gears or whatever, but where is the motor? Like, what's the heart of this thing? How does it work? So I
Yeah,
remember, I was riding the school bus, and I had a small DC motor that I had extracted from a toy that I had cannibalized the night before with me. And I was just spinning it around in my hand. And I was sitting at the back of the bus. And this 11th grader kid, his name was Francis, he comes and sits next to me, and he's like, "What do you have there?" I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "It's a DC motor." And he's like, "Do you know what that is?" I'm like, "No idea." So he reaches into his bag, he pulls out a AA battery, and he hooks
yeah,
the two ends together and starts spinning, right? And I'm like, "What? How'd you do that?" Right? And he gave me the battery and he gave me the wire. He's like, "You can connect any battery you want into it. Just be careful. Never, ever, ever plug it into the mains." So he gave me that bit
yeah,
of warning. I'm like, "What would happen if I plugged it into the mains?" He's like, "You'd definitely get electrocuted and you'd see a lot of smoke, and then eventually it'll burn up and die." And so the next day I took a few more things. I'm like, "Hey, Francis, what is this? What's that?" And he starts showing me a bunch of things, right? So it just takes a little bit of a push in the right direction, and then of course I'm
yeah,
like, I've unlocked the secrets of the universe. Like, I know how a motor works, and so I was obsessed with motors, and I would try to find as many as I could, and I tried to power them, and invariably I came across stepper motors. I'm like, these don't work. Like, this motor must be broken. Why are there 5 wires or 6 wires coming out of this? And it took a long time for me to actually understand what that was, because again, even with all of this curiosity, if you're spending half your time just being a mad scientist experimenting with stuff, your academics is going to suffer a little bit. And so that was the problem my parents had. Like, like, spend a bit more time studying as well instead of just doing these mad scientist experiments. But of course
yeah,
I never stopped. So I insisted, like, when I was when I was about 11 years old, I insisted that my parents get me like a chemistry set. Man, I would spend hours just mixing things randomly and just seeing what would happen. And some of my happiest days were spent, covered in weird dyes and iron filings and whatever,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
piece of
I even had my piece of iron filing in my eye. I get it like removed.
That's not
Yeah,
comfortable.
yeah, magnets
Yeah,
and iron
yeah.
filling.
Exactly. And then, like the siphon effect, man, I remember the first time I came across the siphon effect. Like, there was a drum, and I would take like all of my toy cars and stuff with me into the bath. I'd spend hours there. And what had happened was that my dad brought home an IV infusion set because he wanted the filter for something. My dad's a tinkerer as well.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
so I found like all of this pipe just sitting around. So I'm like, I'm just going to play some kind of an imagination game with it, and I put that in the drum, and I noticed that water would actually come out. And even if I raised the pipe, water would still keep coming out. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I've
yeah, yeah,
discovered some kind of a pump. And my dad's like, "Oh, you discovered the siphon effect." I'm like, "What the hell's a siphon?" And of course, it took a while to understand that. But I would always do stuff like this, right? Like, I remember when we got our first top loader washing machine, I was so fascinated with that thing. I would just spend hours watching it, right? Like, just trying to understand how it works. And then I would make models of it, using a little paper cup, a
yeah,
little
yeah,
motor with a little impeller, and I would like take little rags, put them in there, like pretend that that was a washing machine. It's
yeah.
just fun stuff.
I mean, playing with motors. Did you ever like reverse engineer it and make a dynamo out of it?
Yes, yes, I actually did. So
I mean,
we went on.
it is a fun experience,
Oh
and
my
like,
god.
yeah.
It is ridiculous. It is so much fun. I remember we were in Jeddah until I was in the 6th grade, and then afterwards my dad got another job and we moved to another city in Saudi called Tehran. But we had to spend like 6 months in India for the visa and stuff. So we ended up going to Hyderabad, where my mom's family used to live. And so my mama, he had a bicycle with a dynamo on it. And the first time I
Okay.
saw that, my mind was
Yeah.
absolutely blown, right? So I had to get a dynamo, which I did. And I put it on a bicycle and I would ride it around. And then I realized, like, when you stop, the light goes off. So I wanted to solve that problem, and my mama happened to be an electronics engineer. So he's like, maybe we can put a capacitor in line with that. So I'm like, what's a capacitor? And so obviously I got introduced to all of
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
things. And so I had a capacitor on there, and my light would be the most stable of all the other kids with the dynamos on their bikes. So I had heaps of fun with that as well. In fact, that's something that I love messing around with till this day. Like on my desk upstairs, I always have a few things that I'm tinkering with, and there's like a DC motor that's connected to an LED, and it's just a fidget toy for me. Like I'll be sitting there reading something and just fidgeting with the light going on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the way I did discover the dynamo was I connected two motors with a like a gear of sorts with the shafts, and like I connected one with the battery, and I then connected LED on the other end of the
Yeah,
motor. So it basically transferred electricity by converting it into mechanical motion. And
yeah.
through that, with the experience in the motors also, I did discover torque, like how did it actually works.
Yeah, that's exactly it, like, and this is the thing, right? For all of the kids in my life at the moment, like cousins, their children, whatever, I always like to give them gifts that allow them to explore the world in a way that they probably haven't, right? um, you know uh, I'll meet children and I'll be like, hey, you got a battery over here, can you touch both? No, 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 I can't touch both, I'll get electrocuted. And I have to show them, look, you're not going to get electrocuted, because this is not what happens. And showing them the practical stuff, right? And I think this is where we fail sort of as a culture, because I think it's only a very small subset of students who actually get exposed to the practical side and the discovery side and the joy of discovery. Look, even though things have been discovered for a very long time, you're not born knowing everything. And just because something has been discovered in the past doesn't mean that you can't discover it again and feel the joy and the passion that comes with that, and then that propels you towards something else. And I think and this is why I really like Cosmofluencer and all of these other projects, is because again, we're giving that exposure to our people. They really need that. Rote learning, ratta, and all of this stuff. I never believed in that. I could never do those sort of things. For me, it was always like, I'm going to say it in my own words. As long as I am getting the essence of the subject correct, it should not be a problem, because then I can extrapolate from there and do something else with it.
Yeah. And talking about imaginative thinking, what type do you have? Like, do you think imaginatively 3D renders, or like you think in words or like images?
I think in images. So I will literally have like a three-dimensional model in my head that I can rotate and look at
Okay,
from
yeah,
different
okay,
angles.
yeah, the video
Yeah,
3D
it's in
renders,
full
I guess.
color, full motion, uh, and I'll,
Yeah, it
I'll
is
work out
same for
those.
me.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
I'm a
and
visual operator that way, in that regard. But and I'm a bit of a wordsmith. I obviously enjoy language and communication and that sort of thing. The one thing I cannot do very well is mental arithmetic, is because I have dyscalculia. So my brain has a, like, this area of the brain, like just back here, is where your math centers are. And I
okay,
have a bit of a distortion in my brain, which prevents me from visualizing numbers. So I can visualize machines, I can visualize gears, I can work out how it might be working. In fact, that's how I code as well. I create a Rube Goldberg machine in my head, and my inputs are essentially steel balls that are flowing, uh,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, going down a channel, and then they're hitting certain things which have certain actions. That's essentially how I do coding in my head. So I'll imagine a Rube Goldberg machine, and I'll write the code based on what that is telling me. It doesn't always
How are
work
you?
right, but
Yeah, how are your spellings? I mean,
my spellings are good, not bad. I do have that tendency to be like, I misspelled that, because we're so reliant on autocorrect these days.
okay,
But
okay.
never had too much of a problem with spellings. Although
Yeah,
my
maybe.
early English teachers might tell you he was hopeless.
Okay, I mean, maybe the thing which you are telling about maths, maybe I have with the spellings,
Hmm.
because I mean, it was always an issue about the e's and the a's, uh, and like uh, writing ARE in two or three, or ATE in two or three different spellings in a page. Like I'm talking about was when I was in sixth or seventh grade.
Hmm.
But right now I also like yesterday I was writing the spelling of school, SCHOOL. I mean, it is a universal language, a universal word, and it is used a lot. But after writing it, I felt a bit alien. Uh,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
was
Like you look at the
Yeah,
word and you go, "This spells school. Shouldn't it be SKOOL or
no, no, no,
SCOOL?"
not really that. But I feel this word is misspelled. But I checked the Google. It is true. But I mean, if I try to like question why do I feel it is alien to me, I mean it is something to do with the I don't know the actual, like I don't register the actual spelling. I just memorize the squiggly lines of what makes a school.
Yep.
I think maybe, I don't know. I'm not
So I think
like a
what you're saying
professional about.
sounds a bit like mild dyslexia, whereas
Maybe.
dyscalculia is exactly the same thing, only it's with
Yeah.
numbers. Dyslexia is with words, and dyscalculia is with numbers. Sometimes some unlucky people can get both dyslexia and dyscalculia. So, for example, the multiplication tables, right? Bro, I could never memorize them. I still don't know them, right?
How
And
much, like what's the highest you know?
I could probably make my up to the fives table. I'm all right because I can read time, but anything beyond that, like it gets hard, man. It gets really difficult. And
Yeah, I
so
mean
people would tell me,
I personally low till 15, and
"Oh,
that's
good on
only
you."
because I was incentivized to get whatever I want if I learned till 20th. But 19 is a difficult, and
Hmm,
16 is a bit easy compared to, but I don't remember that also.
yeah.
And how much do you like use the table of 16 and 19 and 18? And yeah, the why I, what how I was incentivized is like I was told to get anything I want, and then I wanted a microscope basically.
Oh, you too, huh? Okay.
Because my father again has it in his office lab. He works in the government, so he can use it. And then I got it. And then after some years, my brother got a plastic cheap microscope of sorts. So I mean, it is funny that I was able to use a real microscope before and a toy one.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Like the first microscope I actually had was a toy. It was a gift from one of my uncles. And
Okay.
later on, I think like by the time I was in eighth grade, my dad gave me a proper microscope. It was a monocular one, but it had, a movable stage and everything, so it was pretty useful. And that really came in handy later on in life, like when I was in dentistry. And studying histopathology and learning how to differentiate between different cells, being able to identify a neoplastic cell, cancerous cell compared to the others.
Okay.
That takes a lot of practice, and the more time you spend looking through a microscope and looking at the fine features, the better off you're going to be later on with that kind of stuff. It's not easy though, it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. I mean, talking about what you do professionally, like what you have studied till date, if we can quickly go through it.
Obviously, I started off as a dentist, obviously, because I mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so, that was about, so dentistry is about 4 years, in terms of study, and then 1 year in internship. So that's a total of 5 years. I managed to graduate in a grand total of seven. And the reason for that is because second year I took a drop because I got hepatitis A. And so I was not really well for about 3 to 6 months. I missed a lot of that stuff, so I had to kind of repeat that. But then later on, I started facing a lot of discrimination within the college from the management and that kind of stuff, which led to a lot of friction. And so by the time I was in final year, I basically made a challenge to a few of the worst professors, who were really, really discriminating against me openly. And so I basically said that, look, because we're having all of this friction, and this happened because they tore my clinical journal, the HOD. He tore it because he has an ego, And I wasn't willing to massage his ego. So he ripped it and he threw it across the classroom. And then he tried to degrade me, like, go pick it up and then, beg for forgiveness. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do any of that. You're going to go and pick up my journal. You're going to bring it back. You're going to fix it and you're going to sign it. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm going to fail you. I'm like, you can't fail me because I refuse to sit in the practical exam. I will go and give the theory exam. And I promise you, I will get higher marks than your pets. And if I get higher marks than your pets, then you, in front of this entire class, have to agree that you will not harass me anymore. And then when I come for the practicals, you will sign my journal without any complaints. If I fail that exam on my own, that's on me, but you will not harm
Okay.
me any further. And so the exam came. This was final year, and I go for the theory exams. I'm fine. Come back to my room, and then about 20 days later, we had our practicals, and our practicals would go on all day. So we had 7 subjects, and it would be 7 days, no breaks, 7 exams, and 12 hours. And I remember on the day of the pediatric dentistry exam, this guy came to my room and tried to drag me to the exam hall. I said, no, we have a deal. I'm not sitting in that paper. I'm going to get more marks than your pets, and you're going to do the right thing. So I didn't sit for that exam. So 6 months voluntary drop there again. But I scored higher than their pets. And true to his word, he did not harass me. Like, literally, I was attending one of his lectures, and he's like, he asked me some question, and everyone would read from the crappy books. I preferred the slightly higher end textbooks that we had available in the library, because I
Okay.
didn't really enjoy the Indian authors. There was some outdated stuff in their content as well. And he asked me a bunch of questions and I answered as per the other books. And then he addresses the entire class. He's like, don't look at Parvez. He can read a textbook, he can understand whatever, and he can write it in the exams. You guys can't do it. And I thought that was really weird. Then he's like, are you interested in attending my lectures? I'm like, not really. He's like, okay, you can leave. I'm going to give you full attendance. I'm like, you're not joking. You're not going to like pull the rug out from under me later. He's like, no, no, no. You've proven yourself. You can leave. You don't need to attend my lectures. Right.
Okay.
So, like, I'm a bit combative that way as well. I'm not combative for nonsense. I don't like being combative, but I won't back down from fighting for my rights. Be it a professor, be it a police officer, be it a judge, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as I know that I haven't done anything illegal, I'm not going to back down. And that's another thing that I want to try and get people to understand, especially in India. You know, many of our people are too meek. They don't know how to stand up for themselves. They don't know how to fight for their
Yeah.
rights. And so they end up getting trampled. And that's not fun for me. It might be fun for other people, but because I was there, because it happened to me, I don't want it to happen to anyone else. So that's what drives me,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't work out. So it's
Yeah. I
okay.
mean, India is a very big country.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But anyway, so I finished dentistry in around 2009. I completed my internship as well. And internship is essentially just working for free, doing the clinics and that kind of stuff. Afterwards, I started my own practice, and I practiced until 2014. And in 2014, I decided, well, 2013 actually, I decided, okay, I've always loved computers, I've always loved technology. And I remember when I was in my dental practice, I had to buy a lot of expensive equipment. So, are you familiar with dental amalgam? Those silver fillings that dentists do?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like silver mixed with copper and zinc. It's an alloy,
Yeah,
and you
it's
amalgamate
used
that
in
with
old days,
mercury.
right?
No, it's still used. It's still one of the better
Okay.
dental restoratives, but now it's being superseded by something called composite resin. So, composite
Yeah.
resin, you get two varieties: the self cure and the light cure. The self cure stuff, you mix it and you have a small amount of time before it'll set, so you have to work with it. The light
Yeah, I
cured
guess
one.
I had done mine about 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Mhm.
It was a 3M and it was, I think, a light cure.
Yeah, yeah, the 3M
Yeah.
light cured composite resin, or Coltine Veld, and there's many brands. And so you have a light cure machine, right? So it's a visible light cure. You need to supply light in the sort of violet, ultraviolet range, so
Yeah.
460 to 480 nanometer range. And what that does is that there's a polymerizing chemical, bis GMA, present in there, and that starts to release the molecules, which then start to form the molecular change, which then sets the material. And so I remember I bought a visible light cure for about 1,20,000 rupees, right? And I started examining that light, like, okay, I've spent this much money on it. Like, how the heck does this thing actually work? And I took it apart. I opened it up, and inside I found an LED driver and a bunch of microcontrollers and a fiber optic light guide. I'm like, 120,000 for this, right? And so then I went online and I started to look for easy to learn kits to learn how to program microcontrollers. I'm like, that's the one thing I didn't know, was how to program microcontrollers. I could work on
Okay, it
circuits. I could build.
started your transition from dental to IT.
Pretty much. So I basically
Okay,
I
okay.
got myself an Arduino, and I taught myself C programming, and I created a visible light cure, right? And it worked. It worked perfectly. I never used it on a patient because obviously it's not a certified device.
Yeah, medical
Uh,
reasons. Yeah.
exactly, legal reasons and ethical reasons. I never used it on a patient, but I would try on models, and it worked, man. It worked perfectly. And I didn't even have a very powerful computer back in the day. I had a simple netbook. It was an Intel Atom device. I had 8 gigs of RAM. And I remember, I'm like, I was really fascinated with 3D technology, 3D printing, and that kind of stuff. I hated creating dental models. You would take an
Yeah.
impression, then you have to pour plaster, and then you have to keep it dimensionally stable. I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to go all digital. And this was in 2012. And so I basically figured out how to create a simple laser scanner using a webcam, a calibrated sheet with a bunch of checkers on it. Like then and then placing an object at a known distance in front of it, right? And then if I take a laser beam and if I collimated that into a straight line, and if I sort of sweeped it up and down over that object, I could create a point cloud, which then I could use to create a 3D image, and I could apply a texture on top, and voila. And so I created a program again, and when I say I created a program, I wrote a bunch of scripts. I took some other people's work, some work from here and there, combined all of that together, and I was able to create a very rudimentary, very basic 3D scanner that actually worked. When you looked at it, you'd be like, yeah, that's a person's jaw. And you could do a bit of diagnosis with it, but it wasn't very good quality. So that gave me the confidence that, okay, I could probably do something in IT as well. So I started going and visiting a bunch of colleges in India, and I would tell them that, look, I built this, I built that, I want to learn engineering. And what would happen is people would laugh at me. They'd be like, you didn't study math in after 10th grade. I'm like, yeah, but I can use a calculator. Oh, calculator is not allowed. I'm like, okay. I go to someone else, and they're like, oh, Dr. Saab, stay in your lane. Like, why does a doctor want to become an engineer? You go to someone else, like, why did you waste a seat? Someone else could have done it. I'm like, look, man, it's my choice what I want to do. So then I started looking abroad, and I realized that, countries abroad, they're like, oh, you want to study IT? You have no experience in IT whatsoever? Okay. Have you studied math? No, you haven't studied math. Okay. But you still want to do a master's in IT? Okay, tell us why. Tell us your passion. So
Yeah.
I wrote
Yeah.
them an essay. I told them about my passion. And I applied to 6 universities. I got accepted in 5. And I decided, okay, I'm going to go and study at the Queensland University of Technology. And so that's how I ended up in Brisbane. And I did a 2-year Master of Information Technology course over there. And it was quite intense. It was nothing like India. In India, you're given a set curriculum, you're given stuff to memorize, you're told that this is what will happen, that's what will happen. This was
Among the college courses which I have done, and I think which are similar to what I have done, it is hopeless on what a college actually teaches.
exactly.
I can go in depth later on, but yeah.
Yeah, but so the thing that made this course different was they had a bunch of topics, right? Like, so we had, network engineering, network design, network administration, database, whatever. But it was never like, oh, study this, study that, right? It was like, okay, we're going to work on this technology, and they would introduce it as a project to us, right? At the end of the day, the lecturer would give us the concepts, and there was no pressure to attend the lectures. The lectures were all recorded. You could watch the recording anytime you wanted. The only thing that they asked us to attend was the tutorials, because those were not put online, and you might miss something important. And the tutorials were an opportunity for us to get physical with the hardware and stuff. And so what I realized very quickly is that, the education system in the West is not trying to force feed you stuff. Yes, there are certain things that you must remember, But it's more about how do you find information? How do you judge whether that information is worth your time, whether it's actually based in some kind of fact? And then how do you use that information to create something useful? Right, and that is ultimately the point of education. It's not just to, give you a decorative piece of paper that you can say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a PhD or whatever. It's more about what can you do with this knowledge? How do you learn how to apply this knowledge to your daily life, your day-to-day life? And if we succeeded at doing that a lot more, I think, nothing can stop us from becoming the kind of developed country and people that we want to be. I remember, like, in 2014, when I moved to Australia, and I would talk to Australians, and they'd ask me, like, where are you from? I'd be like, yes. And they're like, South America. I'm like, why would you say South America? Is it because of your accent? You sound American. I'm like, okay, I'm from India. Like, no way. And then people would be like, oh, you Indians, you guys are so clever, you're so smart, and then I'd blow their minds even further by telling, oh, you used to be a dentist. I'm like, how do you go from dentist to engineer? And like, I tell them, like, I'm passionate about this stuff. And so there was this welcoming aura for people who wanted to do things, right? And if you showed sincerity, if you showed that you were interested in this, people would give you time of day. And so I was lucky in the sense that I managed to attract a good number of people for our various group projects, and so that was really successful. And like, towards the final 2 semesters of my study in Master of Information Technology, I got really interested in cybersecurity. And I ended up essentially recreating Stuxnet. Do you know what Stuxnet is?
No,
So
not
in 2010, Iran's nuclear program, it had a catastrophic incident. So in order to I guess, purify uranium, you need to put them inside these incredibly sensitive, very expensive machines. They're centrifuges, we come a full circle. And so, incredibly sensitive machines that are controlled by PLCs, programmable logic controllers, like the industrial process control machines. And so, what happened was in 2010, for whatever reason, all of the centrifuges in Iran's nuclear facilities ended up destroying themselves. They started spinning so fast, they basically exploded. And everyone's like, how does that happen? How does a control system suddenly just, lose all control? And so it was determined that
let
it
me
was.
let me guess. Was it due to some nuclear activity or radiation on the microchips?
No, no, it was actually
Okay, okay,
malware. And obviously, the US has never admitted it, but it was most likely the US. And so the way
okay.
that this worked was it targeted certain machines. It was loaded onto a thumb drive. The thumb drive went inside. It got connected to a bunch of computers, and from there, it traversed into the programmable logic controllers. And so in my final semester project, it was essentially a black box penetration test, essentially where my professor, he was talking to a colleague in the University of Essen in Duisburg in Germany, and what they had was a programmable logic controller. They had a couple of water tanks, and the objective was to see if any one of Ernest's students could break into that network, enumerate all the targets, figure out what was going on, and cause a water leak. And so I remember, like, when we started that project, there were 10 of us. Within 2 weeks, there were only two of us, three of us. And by the end of the 6 week, there was only two people left, me and this other Chinese guy. And we were both, doing different things. And I asked for access to the SCADA lab, so that I could experiment with programmable logic controllers.
Okay.
And I figured out how they basically work. Then I broke into the network. I enumerated all of the machines over there, and I found this interesting machine. So this German dude, he would log in and he would use ladder logic, and he would work on that stuff and create it. I'm like, I need to understand what's going on over here. I don't speak ladder logic. I don't program in VDL, and there's no reason for me to learn that. But there should be a way to compromise this. So what I did was I wrote a small script that would take a screenshot of that guy's screen every 10 seconds or so. Okay. And inside that script, I hid another, like, I created a OneDrive account, just a random one. And I put in a little uploader. So while the guy was working, it would take screenshots. Then, when the guy would go away and the computer would be locked for 5 minutes or so, it would take all of those images, compress them, and upload them into OneDrive. And then the next day, I would open up OneDrive and I'd see like hundreds, thousands of these images. Now I'm like, okay, I'm just clicking through them. I'm like, man, this is going to take forever. So then essentially, I took all of those screenshots and I converted them into a long GIF, an animation, right? And just sitting there and watching, I'm like, oh, I understand what this is doing. And then I basically wrote a bunch of other programs that allowed me to overwrite the memory directly on the PLC using a couple of obscure libraries. It would not set off an alert on the HMI, the human machine interface, and basically showed how vulnerable industrial control processes are. And apparently that was good enough that Google contacted me, like, hey, come and do an interview with us. And like, oh shit, I'm making it. And obviously I was super excited about that. I went through Google's ringer. Their interview process is terrible. And I had a very high opinion of Google starting the process. But by the time it ended, I'm like, I never want to work at this place again. And so that was like, an eye opener for me. And basically, it underscored to me that the kind of person I am, I won't do well in a very political environment. Google is a highly political environment. And unfortunately, there was a time when they were interested in technology. Now they're just interested in money and their bottom line. I'm like, that doesn't attract me. So step away.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, a yes or no question. Was it your curiosity primarily on why you did well in tech and why you did well in the malware detection you told me?
I think it's a bit of persistence.
Okay.
Yes, definitely curiosity, definitely wanting to know about a lot of different things. Look, for a hacker to be effective, you have to be very, very curious, right?
Yeah.
You can't just accept an explanation. Like, you want to test things out for yourself. You want to see if you can break things. You want to see if you can make them do something that they weren't actually designed to. And so you have to have a lot of knowledge with respect to this kind of stuff. And so my current profession, I'm a DevOps engineer. So DevOps engineering is essentially development and operations. It's a combination of the two, because normally the programming guys don't know too much about the hardware that runs their software. The hardware guys don't know too much about the software, and there was always a
Yeah.
disconnect. The DevOps guys, we bring all of that together. And so what that means is we have to be like these super generalists, right? Because we're unblocking the developers, we're running their code, we're also site reliability engineers, we're also responsible for security. And so you have to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. But more importantly, you have to know how to be able to track down the source of a problem, make sure it's not a false flag or a red herring, and then being able to do something with it, being able to do something useful with it. And so being able to create small proof of concepts, creating test networks, doing experiments. That's basically part of my job, and I love it. So again, it's like, being a generalist. uh, People tell us that no, you have to be a specialist, you have to be a super specialist. Sure, okay, yeah, if you're really interested in something and you really want to get into it, yeah. But I think it's far better to be a generalist, like a jack of all trades. You don't have to be a master of everything. You can be a master of a few things, but it will serve you a lot better, because it becomes that much harder for anyone to mislead you or take you for a ride.
Yeah, I mean, I did a debate of sorts on generalist and specialist. Basically, what I think is you need to be broadly generalist and selectively specialist.
Absolutely,
So
I
like
cannot
it's a
disagree
it's
with
an axis. The y-axis is generalist and the the z-axis, no, sorry, x-axis is a specialist and y-axis is generalist. And no, wait, the x-axis is generalist and the y-axis is specialist. And you have to like get a basic knowledge of many topics so that you can spread on the x-axis on the generalist one.
May I
And
suggest
then
something? So if it's like this,
yeah,
and
basically,
yeah, so like that, right?
yeah,
So you're
journalist and
you're going from
specialist.
zero. Like, this is where you were born. This is like, I don't know, fifth grade. This is 10th grade. This is your college. This is your work, right? So what happens normally is that we go, oh yeah, like, this is generalist work, and then we hit college, and then we go into specialization territory, right? But then there's all of this stuff. You're still going, but you're going like that. But I think what
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to do
definitely.
is you want to take your baseline, you want to make that over here, and then you have little blips that go like this. But overall, your trajectory should be trending upwards. So you have a broad breadth of knowledge. You're a specialist in something, and nothing scares you.
Yeah, basically how I think it, it's not a line per se, but it the journalist thing covers very vast topics. So like
Yes,
the pointers are the topics, and for like they are the seeds of a tree. And however like well a tree grows, it is the specialization basically.
yeah. Well, I mean,
So
you could
so you
say
are
to a certain extent, yes.
and when there are two topics which are like near with them, that the trees can interact with each other, and then we can like have a multiply effect where we can understand something.
Exactly.
You are
So,
getting
like,
my point?
okay, think about it, right? Like, so, what are the similarities between, say, a doctor and a computer technician? Can you find any similarities at all, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, basically the tech which use for your example, the curing thing, the light curing thing.
No, so that's a really in-depth one. I want it to be a lot simpler,
Okay.
right? Like, so when you walk into a doctor's office or when you go to a hospital, the first thing that any good doctor or nurse or whatever will do is get your medical history, right? They want to know what is your problem. They'll ask you and they'll
Yeah,
write down your chief complaint in your own words, and that's important. And then afterwards, they're going to ask you a bunch of things like what made it better? Did anything make it worse? Did you try anything? Okay, what happened then? And so they'll get all of this information from you, right? And when you're trying to help someone with computer problems, so you start with the chief complaint, like what is the problem? And they'll say, oh, my
yeah,
computer is
definitely.
doing this or whatever, or it's not making any sound. Okay, write that down. Then, okay, when did this problem start? Did you do anything to fix it? Did you run a virus scan? Did you do this? Did you do that? So you're collecting all of this information, you're collecting the history, but at the same time, you're also understanding and you're deducing things about either the patient or you're deducing things about the user, their environment. And then you can use that information in the same kind of way. Like in medicine, you don't randomly start treating a person, right? You come up with something known as a provisional diagnosis, or you come up with a differential diagnosis. So the differential diagnosis is all of the possible things that could be wrong, right? The provisional diagnosis is when you've taken your differential and you've done your deductions and you worked out, okay, no, it's probably not that, but it's most likely this, or it could be this, or it could be that. So I'll give you my provisional diagnosis, which is this, and also possibly this, and this is how we're going to confirm it. We're going to do a test, we're going to do some imaging or whatever. And then based on that, we can start an empirical treatment. And it's similar in IT as well. It's like, okay, so you say you have all of these problems, then I'll come up with a provisional diagnosis. So you know what, I think it could be a driver issue if it's audio, or maybe there's a mechanical issue, a hardware failure that's occurring. And so I'll ask more questions, like clarifying questions, like, did you drop your laptop? Do you think anyone spilled anything on it, or whatever? And so based on that, I can then focus my efforts on what needs to be fixed. And so you can take learnings and knowledge from one profession, you start to apply it to another profession, and you start to see differences come through, right? You start to see new kinds of information, new kinds of outputs come through. And with AI and everything, I think it's going to be a very interesting time for people to essentially see how we can incorporate AI into our workflow without making people redundant. I think that's the biggest question right now.
Yeah, I mean AI is a lot of whole vast different topics. And what I feel about AI, there should be like there is a consciousness, a subconsciousness. There should be a personification of consciousness, which is basically AI,
Hmm.
and
So,
it would.
I will disagree with you on that one. And I'm on Sir Roger Penrose's side. I will also put myself out there and I'll say that, and probably even Stephen Wolfram, that consciousness is not algorithmic, right?
No, no,
We
no,
will never
not
have a
really.
conscious AI
Yeah,
because it's quantum.
basically, yeah, yeah, I get that point, and I am like I do watch podcasts or discussions of sort for like 2 3 hours on these topics. But what I am thinking is like consciously what we do is we gather stuff and like the brain process it, and we get an output basically. Like when a child is born, he gets all the inputs, so I want to train an AI, or like for me personally to get that inputs and store in their memory, and like that would be the raw data. And like
Yeah.
when you are 18, you would be given access to it, and then you would be like having a very uh super voice for your own thoughts and things,
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, look,
And it
it's an
can
interesting
even be your
concept.
personal, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
even
no,
can be
it's
personal
undoubtedly a
information.
very, very interesting concept, and I think there are people actively working towards enabling that kind of a reality. You know, you look at things like, the brain-machine interfaces, Neuralink, and there's a couple of other companies working towards that, where essentially they want to, put an implant or something inside a person's brain, which allows them to interface directly with a computer, bypassing our eyes, bypassing our hands, essentially removing that bottleneck in terms of how quickly we can either consume information that's provided externally and how quickly we can create information, which we then use to instruct the machine. And if you could do that, at the speed of thought and, without actually having to to interface directly with a machine, that opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. Half of them are extremely terrifying, and the other half are extremely
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So again, it's one of those gray areas, and we know, like going back on humanity's track record, a couple of millennia, we know that if there is a possibility of misuse, we will 100% misuse it. And so I'm excited, but also terrified at the same time.
yeah. I mean, AI is very like due to the chat GPT, it is more accessible also.
Yeah, but again, that's not
So
true AI. That's just
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. I do
marionette.
get it.
It's yeah,
What we
it's smoke
want
and
is a
mirrors.
AGI basically.
Yeah. I don't know if we
Yeah,
want
but
one. I would love to interact with one. I don't know if we want one.
and there are many like misalignments and the higher debates which we can discuss. But like the chat gpt, how I got to use it basically, it was December second week, like last to last year, 23 I guess. And my exams were going on, and there was a online exam basically, French or psychology, I don't remember. It was an additional one. So I got to know it is like it is released, the chat gpt 3.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
used it, and like it solved all of my questions, and I like just copied it. So it was my, yeah, it was my first reaction. And like I was basically able to see like how much it can answers the questions and
Oh yeah.
etc.
Dude,
And
like
after an year, we just had to like upload the quizzes, the 15 to 10 to 15 months. We just uploaded the questions, and like it solved it, and we just marked it. And
yeah. So, like my first impression, like when I used ChatGPT, I'm like, I didn't have any hopes. I'm like, this is probably gonna be like Microsoft Tay. Have you ever come across Tay? It was a AI chatbot Microsoft released back in, I think, 2010, some, and
okay.
essentially, like within a few hours of it being online, the users had converted it into a Nazi, and so they had to take it down because it was spewing all
Yeah, yeah,
kinds of.
the data is very important in these things.
Exactly, exactly. And they were live training it with that data, and they underestimated the capacity of human beings to be absolute crap, right? But I was very impressed when I saw what it could do. And then after I played around with it for maybe a day or two, I think I spent the next week just walking around in a daze, not making eye contact with anyone, because I'm like, shit, I'm gonna be out of a job soon. And more than that, it was like, for me, people sort of looked up to me because, oh, you have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, and so I would constantly get asked questions. I'm like, why would people need people like me anymore? Like, what becomes my function? What becomes my role in society? What do I need to do to stay relevant? Because, looking at this technology and looking at the trajectory of how technology has advanced, it would be
Yeah,
extremely stupid of me to think that, oh no, it's just going to die off over here, or no, it's never going to take away creative jobs. I knew immediately, programmers, their days are numbered. Graphics designers, their days are numbered. Content writers, days are numbered. All kinds of technical professions, like my job is to automate stuff. That doesn't mean my
yeah,
job cannot be automated. It absolutely can be, and it will be. And so, I think the challenge, especially for you guys, or for kids younger than yourself, just what the heck are you going to do, right? Because a lot of these jobs are going to get automated. You think you
yeah,
could fall
definitely.
back to being a gardener? Forget it, there's a robot for that. You want to clean houses? No, no, we're building robots for that as well. You know, I've got a robot vacuum upstairs. I'm just waiting for something that can iron my clothes, and I don't think it's going to be more than a couple of years before I can probably buy an Optimus Butler or something. Although I probably wouldn't buy any of Elon Musk's junk.
Yeah, yeah,
But
basically.
you know, like that's the kind of future that we're headed towards. And so it really worries me, and I think like now we still have a little bit of an opportunity to help as many people as we possibly can, to inspire them, and hopefully, you know, we can step into this brave new world. Because again, you know, like, can you imagine if we brought back someone from, I don't know, the 1950s, right, and we showed them the world today? they'd they'd probably be convinced that, you know, like half of us are wizards, the other half are like warlocks and witches and whatever. Like, this stuff would be magic.
Yeah.
It would be nothing short of magic to someone like that. And with what is coming, the stuff that's in the pipeline, it's like, you know,
And it
hard to
is
imagine.
very like kind of concerning that how easily we forget what the things were before 10 years, and then we can't
Absolutely.
compare like how well we have advanced. But
Exactly.
what I think, AI is very very capable thing, and the true uh, possibilities would be like endless afterwards. But I am always looking for its uh, optimistic possibilities,
Yeah.
where like among my personality and the interests which I have and etc, there is a vision of sorts which I do want to fulfill maybe in my lifetime. It is of sorts, uh, imagine a picture basically. Yeah, one sec. Yeah, so basically there are here are planets, some of them, and here is a big spaceship, and behind them there are smaller spaceships.
Like that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, not this. It is a unidentified flying object, but basically, uh, yeah, but basically, what it is, the humanity is going to explore the universe with the help of AI and etc. Uh, and just colonizing the universe.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and how I feel it can be done a bit fast is with like non-linear space travel basically.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do it right now, but I think it is there is
Are you
not
talking about a
stopping us.
warp drive? Because we need to create a warp drive.
Yeah, a warp drive, but basically opening up dimensions and like traveling hundreds of light years in a second.
Dude, okay, Yash, I'm so glad you brought this up. Have you been following any of the recent UFO, UAP stuff that's been happening across the world, especially United States,
Recently
obviously?
in December, January, or before that, or like the starting Roosevelt stuff. Which one
Hmm.
are you talking about?
No. So, look, I think the first one you're talking about was 1947, right? That was the Roswell crash.
Yeah, the yeah crash.
No, no, no. There's been new stuff that's been happening, right? Like, so since
The
November
orbs,
last
November,
since
December,
November
right?
last year. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
So
yeah,
in New Jersey, the people have been spotting weird lights in the sky, and so if you look at the videos, some of them are clearly aeroplanes,
yeah, yeah.
but then
I
some
have
of them
seen.
are clearly not aeroplanes. But what's more interesting is that the government itself is saying that, look, a lot of people are misidentifying stuff, but a lot of these drones, we're not flying them. And the FAA also has like drone flight restrictions in all of those areas, and these drones still keep showing up. And so if you like go down this rabbit hole, and a lot of it could be debunked, a lot of it could be called crazy hokum BS, whatever, but a
Yeah,
lot of this stuff is still unexplainable, right? And so if you think about it, the first UAP UFO sightings that were documented occurred right after the Trinity site test, you know, the first ever nuclear explosion, which was carried out by Oppenheimer and colleagues in New Mexico. And then after that, there's been a steady stream. And so 1947, the Roswell crash happened after the first nuclear tests.
yeah,
And so again, you know, we have this period of time where there are these orbs and there are these things, and we don't exactly know what they are. The U.S. military, the Pentagon, they have this disclosure project that's happening at the moment, where they have credible, credible videos and sightings by pilots, by other individuals who are not really
Is
incentivized
my
to lie about this.
screen visible?
Stephen Greer. This guy's one of them. He's part
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah.
group that's responsible for disclosure. And I think he made an announcement today that in 72 hours there's going to be a bunch of whistleblowers who are going to come out and start talking about a lot of the things that people have been seeing. There's another guy called Ross Coulthard. He's on the News Nation thing, and they have a program as well. And they are claiming that this Saturday they're going to be airing an episode where they're going to show actual alien aircraft crash retrieval activities which have occurred. But this is the reason why I'm interested in this, is because a lot of times, and what we learned in school is that everything that needed to be discovered has been discovered, and there's
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
little that needs to be explained. But no, I think what we've done is we've leveled up. We've had a bit of a lull, but we've leveled up, and we've leveled up to the sense that now I think perhaps people are ready to take on the more exotic things, right? Like try and question the big bang model. Like, what would actually cause a big bang? Maybe it's not a big bang. Maybe time is not linear. Maybe time is circular,
I
right?
yeah, I have to stop you right there because the questions would like the list would fill up. Basically, among the December and the November thing, the UFOs which you are talking about, I feel there are two or three sides about the whole alien thing. Is uh one there are like sort of agreements with the US government or the deep state which you call it. They have been visiting us. Second is like they do visit us but they don't contact us, which the Stephen Greer is saying basically. And uh, then there is like this again the Stephen Greer, he says there would be an alien invasion which would be hoax done
Yeah,
by
like
the.
the Project Bluebeam. Look, I'm not even
Yeah,
interested
yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
part, right? But
Yeah,
what I am
I am not.
interested is,
Basically, what I am saying is, I mean, there is a lot of stuff. Even in 2024, Pentagon has like said that aliens do exist and they are among them,
well, they
among
haven't
us.
said aliens exist. What they said is that we don't know what the heck these things are, right? But this
Yeah,
is where it
but
gets.
they have made they have acknowledged it and made the drives public.
Have you seen the Ashton Forbes Weimar video? WIMAR, I think it's. No,
You can pull
hang on.
it up
It's
and
Wide Area
put it on
Motion.
the.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that for you.
Yeah, you can present
But
the
I think
screen
it's
also.
very interesting. And let me see if I can find this. Uh,
And what Stevens basically says is the aliens are actually peaceful and they know a lot about us, but US will or the deep state will use the technology to basically scare us and divert our attention to other topics. I don't know, but it they are saying this. And the UFOs which are people are watching right now, they are not the UFOs which they used to see previously. They are basically the plasma orbs.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I think maybe you might have seen this video. Are you able
Yeah,
to see that come through? So let me just switch back to it. So I'm just going to play this. Now, you see an airplane coming in from here, right? And then it starts panning across. This video actually came out, I think, a week or two after MH370 disappeared. Now you'll see something just come into the screen, and then you see that little orb like thing that starts to circle the
yeah,
aircraft. And you can see a mouse pointer moving across. That's consistent. And I'll get into that in a little while. You can see the markings on the aircraft. You can see that they're sort of circling all around it. And something very interesting happens as soon as it starts to pass these clouds. And just wait for it. Don't blink. If you blink, you might miss it. It'll pan across one more time, and watch how they're oscillating
yeah,
and gone. So I think that sort of is what non-linear space travel would look like,
yeah,
in
yeah.
my humble
Basically,
opinion, right?
yeah.
And so when you look at something like this and you go, okay, how do we know that that's real? Well, a lot of people who are far more knowledgeable than perhaps you and I are have looked at this stuff and they go, look, that's consistent with a Citrix viewer. A Citrix viewer is essentially a remote access application that's used in high security organizations. The US military uses Citrix, and so that the way that mouse pointer moves and changes, it's consistent with that. There's a second video taken on a drone that seems to show another angle of the same aircraft, and everything matches up. The lighting matches up. Hollywood special effects producers have chimed in on this and said, look, you could fake that. You could. But
Yeah.
this video was released within a couple of weeks of MH370 disappearing. There is no way that anyone could have done this quickly. This is like a 6 to 8 month project, even with the technology we have available to us today. And so this raises a question, right? Like, this raises the question, like, do we really understand physics the way we think we understand physics? And it's
Yeah.
easy to go into a
I would
conspiracy
I
theory
would
mindset here.
disturb you. So sorry for that. Apart from the alien stuff, uh, Dr. Stephen Gear also talks about astral projection and remote viewing. And remote
Hmm.
viewing was used in the MK Ultra project, which
Yeah,
was done in the, yeah.
yeah, it's
So
still in use today.
personally, I haven't done the remote viewing thing, but I have by mistake like projected myself in the astral plane,
Hmm.
and I have uh very good memory recalculation
Hmm.
of that. And basically, like I used to do dream journaling in when the pandemic hit and we were all in homes. And what it did was, after a while I used to get very crystal clear, and like I knew everything about them, like these sort of dreams. And like I have not done like a proper categorization, but basically I did had almost 15 types of dreams basically.
Hmm.
And in some of them I was able to, again I can't prove it because it is a personal experience, but I
Hmm.
was able to prove that I was going, uh have you seen Loki? You
Yeah,
understand the
yeah.
variant? Yeah.
Hmm.
I was able to go in the bodies and consciously access them of my other variants.
Hmm.
And I have seen multiple things. I have seen civilization die and revive in my like in 2 or 3 minutes, like it was sped up.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how the laws work there.
Dude, that's really
uh
fascinating. I mean, I've never had an astral projection experience, but that's something I'm keen to try because up until this point in my life, I would just like just say, no, no, this is nonsense. It's a pseudoscience or whatever. But certain things have happened to me as well, which make me go, okay, no, I have to be rational, but I also have to open my mind, and I have to be open to the possibility that perhaps the way that we have conjectured things to be is probably not the case. Now, if there are aliens, and given the size of this bloody universe that we inhabit, it's almost guaranteed that there are aliens. Now, are
yeah,
they visiting us? Look, if there are aliens,
possibly.
then yes, they are definitely visiting us. There's no question about it. They've always been here. Why can't we see them? Why can't we interact with them? Well, that's a different story. They might be interdimensional. They might occupy a different area of the electromagnetic spectrum. They might
Yeah,
not exist as physical forms the way we do. One of the hardest questions in biology is, like, you can determine that something is alive or dead by looking at it under a microscope and trying to identify the structures that we associate with life. But that's life that's evolved on Earth. There's no guarantee that life elsewhere has to follow the same rules, right? And again, like, it's impossible for us to understand or even imagine. I mean, we can speculate, and we call that science fiction, because again, unless you can actually objectively, empirically prove that something exists, you don't know whether it exists or not. But what's exciting
yeah,
for me is that it seemed like we kind of understood that the universe has a speed limit. It's the speed of light. You cannot exceed it, you cannot work around it. But now, with all of this UAP stuff, with the disclosure stuff, and then, one of the most interesting places on the internet is the cia.gov/reading
yeah,
room
yeah,
website. It's one of the most interesting places because you start going through the articles and you go, why the heck would the CIA want to classify that, keep it classified for 20 years, and then declassify it all of a sudden? Which makes you think that perhaps there is a little bit more. maybe not to the extent that it is being projected,
Projected.
but
Yeah.
it's definitely worth another look. And that's what I want to try and impress upon people. Like, it's very easy, very slippery slope. You can go from being a scientific rational person to like, I believe in aliens, I believe in blah 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 blah. You can't prove anything, right? And then before you know it, you're meditating on the bank of the Ganges, and some idiot's coming to interview you. You're like, oh yeah, I used to be an aerospace engineer. It's like, what happened to you? But
I mean, he saw a lot of things.
yeah, I bet he did. I bet he's seeing things to this day. But no, respect to him. Like, honestly, it takes a lot
Yeah.
of courage to give up your career and to try and do something different. Which is like, people were like, "Are you crazy? Like, who gives up
Yeah, maybe I
dentistry to
should
become
get
an
him on the
IT
podcast.
engineer?" I don't know. Like, try your luck, man. But if you do, I'd love to listen in.
Yeah, I am going to the place Kumbh Mela next month.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. How long does that go on? Is it like a couple of months?
A month.
Oh,
It
okay.
will finish up in 26th February.
Okay. Okay. Well, be
So I
safe,
will be
man.
there 3 or 4 days.
Awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. So what I was telling is basically, uh, like the how well you understand yourself, it lingers your uh, memories on your consciousness basically. So whenever I used to travel or used to access the memories in the bodies of my variants, I used to find some discrepancies. And why would I find them? Because I knew my memories also. So
Hmm.
then I would get instantly that I'm in a dream and it is another version of me. So basically, what I did is I was in the dream. I met my grandfather, which is no more in my universe, uh, and I like interacted it. And then the first thing when I saw him, it was, I mean, he is no more in my memory. So where is he right now? So then I used to like decipher it is another universe variants, and like, and
So
then
like
I can
another
access the
dimension,
memories.
or like another universe is in the
The parallel
multiverse?
universe.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's in the
multiverse.
multiverse. Right.
So then I use basically now I am on the a way to understand the stars on in whatever universes I do travel to, and then the dates and the facts which are concrete on in their universe. But yeah, I have not been able to, because it is a very, you have to sleep for
Hmm.
12 hours a day and you have to document it all. It is a very big
So I've
struggle
actually started
basically.
experimenting with the Monroe Institute's Gateway process. It's a collection of tapes, again, from the CIA, back in the 60s. And they have a number of focuses. I'm on focus 10 at the moment. It takes a fair bit of practice, but apparently the idea is that if you practice the Gateway project, and you can find those recordings online for free,
Yeah,
you can actually then astral project at will. And so you will essentially, your body will be asleep but your mind will be awake, and then you'll be able to traverse all of these places. Now, the vast majority of people would look at our conversation and go, I thought these guys were rational. We started off with talking about reasonable stuff, and now we're talking about this almost hokum like thing. But again, the possibility exists, especially if you agree that consciousness is most likely a quantum process. And then all of a sudden it opens the gateways to a lot of things being real. Like, so for
yeah,
example,
definitely.
like when we talk about the soul inhabiting our body, what if it's not like this wispy cloudy thing that's somewhere in the core that leaves the body, but rather it
It
is
has a
quantum
connection with
entanglement?
pineal gland, I think, again
Yeah,
with
so
my
the
dreams
pineal gland,
experiences.
again, like the jury is out on that. But
Yeah,
okay, so it comes down to this, right? If the brain is operating at a quantum level, and we know quantum entanglement exists, which means that you could have particles existing in different universes, well, same universe, but they could tunnel through, right? There's a lot of weird things that happen. And so, what would that look like? That would essentially be latency free, unlimited bandwidth communication that
I'll
occurs across
break
the
to you
universe.
and add on the point. Like, I used to read about the Schrodinger's cat experiment and how it proves the multiple universe theory. And then I used to think, like, what's the basic difference uh, between that universe's molecule and my universe's molecule? uh, i- after studying the Pauli's exclusion principle, on like the four properties of the electrons. So it is basically like basically same. The choices are different, but they are basically same. So then I did understand that there are frequencies, maybe the the conscious frequencies in which other universes exist,
Hmm.
and that's why when
So
we sleep,
that's again
we
interesting. Go
yeah,
on,
we
go on.
can travel between the variants.
Right. Okay. So let's break it down a little bit simpler, right? What is light? Is it a particle or is it a wave?
Both.
Both, right? And that's so interesting. So if we talk about the underlying fabric of the universe as being a quantum wave function, the act of measurement or the act of observing it collapses the wave function, which then causes a particle to exist. And so, by that logic, anything that exists physically within our universe is essentially a quantum wave function. I'm observing it, and so its position gets fixed. The quantum wave function collapses, and so I have my sense of reality.
The
So,
electron double slit
a,
experiment.
yeah, exactly. But and that is essentially the basis for reality as per quantum mechanics, right? Like
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
is in
yeah,
a state of superposition. All of the possible states are possible, but the point in time where you collapse the wave function, that is to say, you open the box, and that's when you know whether the cat is either alive or it's dead. Otherwise, it's in superposition, right? So it's just an illustrative example. So a lot of people get this crazy idea that we create reality within our own minds, and then this leads to this other thing called
perception, projection.
intention and manifesting and all of that stuff, that
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
can imagine or you can sort of direct the reality that you create. And so yes, it might be possible to an extent, because there might be certain things that we are individually responsible for observing, measuring, potentially our own self, which collapses the wave function, which then gives
yeah.
rise to our idea of consciousness, right? But for the universe to exist, for us to be born into this universe, and then to essentially have that shared reality. So if a person lives outside of that shared reality, we call it a pathology. We give it the name of mental illness. We can call them schizophrenics or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
whatever. Right. And again,
I
there's no
have
proof that
experiences with that.
schizophrenics are operating at a higher dimensional level, because again, we cannot communicate with them in an effective way. So this
Yeah.
raises a really important question. If observation and measurement is required to collapse the wave function, which then gives rise to reality, which in turn gives rise to the universe, who is observing the universe?
Definitely. And that's why it is in superposition and parallel universes, basically.
So I think you should
And
look up
maybe
Wolfram's
if
physics. Just really quickly, Stephen
yeah.
Wolfram, he's got a physics project. Look it up and have a read through, and I think that he might be onto something.
Is he really old right now?
Yeah, he's an old guy, Stephen Wolfram. He basically there's this website called Wolfram Alpha. He's the creator of
Yeah,
that. He
I
also wrote
have.
Wolfram Mathematica. He's a really brilliant guy.
Yeah, there is a very good Dr. Steven also, which popularized the string theory. I mean, he has a the World Science Festival, podcast of sorts in the show basically, and I have seen many of the discussions, and even the special relativity 12-hour the video also in which he has.
So again, like it opens up a lot of very interesting possibilities. It
Yeah,
opens up the possibility for interstellar travel. It opens up the
definitely.
possibility of being able to communicate across ridiculous distances instantaneously. It opens up the possibility of potentially limitless energy. Zero point energy is apparently coming back,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so is
yeah,
cold
yeah, yeah.
fusion.
The vacuum
And so,
energy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And so,
let me understand. Let me like tell it in briefly, and do correct me if I'm wrong. It was observed in the vacuum of space if two sheets of metal, or like two walls of a substance is put together with micrometers distance, it attracts itself basically, and that's 0 point energy.
yeah. And if you believe Richard Feynman, he said that there is unimaginable amounts of energy within that small distance, right? So if you could tap into that, you would essentially have an unlimited source of energy, which would allow you to create warp drives, which would allow you to do all kinds of interesting things. But another very interesting possibility arises right now. So remember how we spoke about collapsing the wave function? So what is to say that with every single observation, you don't accidentally create another universe. And maybe you do. Maybe you are. Maybe, these universes are popping up all around us all the time, but they
Yeah,
only exist for like a femtosecond, right? And they're so tiny that they would not be able to exert any kind of force or any kind of thing on our reality. But again, you now have this capacity to create this singularity for that instant in time. And you compare that to the video that we saw, that a lot of experts are saying that it is not impossible to fake, but the timeline and faking it that way doesn't match up. So how
yeah,
do you
definitely.
explain it, right? And so I think this is why it's such an interesting time when people are getting jaded and, oh, there's nothing left to be discovered. Well, hang on, maybe there's a lot more left to be discovered, and perhaps we're being idiots if we think that we figured everything out. We clearly
Yeah,
haven't.
I mean, the main complaints which I have with the science whole infrastructure is they haven't done anything plausible after the whole Einstein phase of the 90s, the 19s.
Well, I mean, no, that's
And
not fair. I mean, there was a lot of work done. Stephen Hawking,
yeah,
he did a lot of
yeah,
interesting things. We were able to
I
image
mean,
a
it
black
was
hole.
not in the mainstream of sorts. Like we have only done the Higgs boson discovery, and like it is silent now, right now, and uh,
It wasn't as big a deal as people thought it would be. Like they
yeah,
thought that
yeah,
you
yeah.
would essentially figure out what gives anything mass, right? And
But they did
so
figure out, right?
they did, but not it didn't unlock the path forward the way they were expecting, because it turns out if you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
break the Higgs
definitely.
boson, it creates more particles. And so the question then becomes, where does it stop? And I personally think, I think it'll never stop, because I believe in fractalism. Like, the universe isn't as complex as
Yeah,
we think it is. It just replicates the kind of structures we see in a larger scale on a smaller scale. The question is, how do you unify the two? How do you unify what the effects we observe at a macroscopic level versus what happens at a microscopic slash quantum level,
yeah.
right?
That's
And that's the holy grail of physics, the grand unification theory. How do you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
combine these two things? How
The
do you
theory of
derive the
everything.
law of electromagnetism from quantum physics, and then reverse and the other way around as well? And so it might turn out that the only fundamental force that exists in the universe is electromagnetism, and everything else is a result of electromagnetic interaction occurring at different points, right? And again, I think it's very interesting. I think perhaps this century we might come close to unlocking the secrets of consciousness if we don't end up destroying ourselves first.
Yeah, definitely. And what I think, maybe if universe is in superposition and because there isn't an observer outside it, maybe if somehow we are able to get outside the universe and observe it, it may collapse and do a big bang. Maybe.
Exactly, like the mere fact that you observe the universe could end it, right? But then that begs a bigger question. So
Where are
if
we
the
if
universe
we are
exists,
observing the
what space
universe?
does it occupy, right?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. I
really,
mean, it's
it's ridiculous, man. Like, and this is why, like, after a point in time, people go, no, it's all a simulation. But even if it's a simulation, then what is
I
that
mean,
reality? Where does that reality?
I don't really think it is simulation. Basically, I don't like the theory that much. I mean, it might be,
It could
and
be.
why it is popularized is basically due to the Matrix movie. And
Yes, of course.
what they say is actually, in the movie, that the we did all the destruction with the AI, then the nukes, and then the AI has used us as a AAA battery,
Pretty much
to like
Duracell.
just simulate it and use us for energy.
That's
So
it.
like
That's it.
it's a dud theory for me.
Yeah, but then again, like, there are a bunch of people, again, remote viewers, and again, if you look at the credibility of these people, you go like, okay, why should I believe a word you're saying? Well, you look at them and they're like, okay, you have a PhD in mathematics, you're a respected professor, and this and that, and you're saying that you remote viewed this machine on the moon that is essentially a soul recycler, and that Earth is a
Yeah, yeah,
prison
yeah.
planet. Like,
Yeah,
that's that kind of stuff.
yeah,
It pisses
I
me off,
have,
but it also fascinates
I
me.
mean, it I have seen the whole video about it. It basically answers the reincarnation theory, and let me explain it. It is very interesting to me also. Like when we die, our soul gets sucked up with the in that machine, and then our experiences are like
Erased.
extracted and used as the fuel is called losh basically, and then the soul is sent back to us, and it is basically a prism of reincarnation, and
Yeah,
the aliens uses it for the.
for their nurturing and their sustenance and their energy. So again, like, so, we're living in a world where people have gone crazy, right? Like, there's rationality, there's a lot of irrationality mixed in and presented to us as rational thought. Then
Yeah,
if you
people are
disagree with
ignorant
things, then you
and they
get
are
accused.
biased. Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I think it gets interesting for folks like us is because, we're interested in a lot of different things. And we naturally have this curiosity. And if enough people start making noise about a certain thing, then I'm naturally attracted to that. Because I'm like, okay, yes, I agree that the vast majority of people are potentially idiots and they don't deserve to be given the light of day. But when you start to
definitely.
see clever people talking about it, then it opens up a bunch of possibilities. Like, okay, this is disinformation, it's false flag, it's some kind of propaganda, or maybe there's something here. So you won't know until you actually look into it. And I hate the being late to the party, so to speak. So you wake up one morning, you go to the office, you're minding your own business, and you see everyone's huddled in little groups, and you go, hey guys, what's going on? And they point at a screen and they go, aliens. Like, what do you make of that, and this and that? And you go, what? Instead, I'd be like, oh
Have
yeah, I
you
looked
seen the
into
movie
that.
Arrival?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I told you.
Yeah. So and so I want to be the kind of person who can look at something and go, no, what you're looking at is a very sophisticated form of disinformation. These are the things that
Yeah.
don't make sense. Whereas someone could be saying, hey, that's disinformation. I'd be like, no, 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 it's genuine, and this is why I think it's genuine. And being able to answer those kinds of questions. I think I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that we get some kind of disclosure, although I don't think that's going to happen. But it would be
I mean,
interesting to
I
see
am
what other
hopeful,
kinds of
but it
physics
would
might exist.
change the trajectory of many things, I think. Or
Absolutely would.
maybe people would forget about it altogether in a year.
I think what would happen is ontological shock. Like, if there is massive disclosure like this, what would happen is that people would be incredibly disturbed for a few
Yeah,
months,
yeah.
until they sort of recalibrated their sense of what is real and what isn't. But I think one of the most catastrophic outcomes could potentially be further complications in interhuman relationships, because the presence of extraterrestrials, non-human intelligence, and we ask them a simple question like, who created you? Do you believe in a creator? Do you believe in God? And they look at us and they go, we created you because we needed slaves, and you're an
So who
experiment that
created
got out of
you?
hand. Oh well,
Who
no,
created
they
the
would just say,
aliens?
oh yeah, well, nothing created us, we were created as a result of randomness, and we went back in time and we verified it. And
Yeah,
so
maybe it is
what does
possible.
that do? What do you think that would do to humanity? It would be chaos, it would be pandemonium. Everyone's
And
worst tendencies would become the mainstream.
yeah, and what I feel personally excited is not the non-linear travel in our universe only, uh, or the time travel, because I am on a mission to do it maybe in my
Same,
lifetime.
man. I
But
want to be a time traveler.
yeah, but to like unlock the access to the parallel realities and be the king of my
You should
timeline.
definitely look into the gateway process. You should definitely. I'll send you a link, the one that I've been using, and you can always go to cia.gov/reading room and search for the gateway process, and you'll find plenty of information. Look up MJ12 as well, Majestic 12, and definitely also take a look at ZPE, Zero Point Energy, and that kind of stuff. There's a very
Yeah,
interesting book
I
as
heard.
well. It's called The Adam and Eve Story. It was written by this guy called Dr. Chan Thomas, who was also a polymath and all round brilliant guy. And it's a small book. You can find the entire PDF on cia.gov/reading room. And this book is called The Adam and Eve Story. And as soon as it was released, it was classified by the CIA for
Yeah,
60 years. And now they recently declassified it. And what does that book tell us? It talks about this cataclysmic event that occurred around 14,500 years ago, around the time of the Younger Dryas. And what Dr. Chan Thomas says is that the Earth, it physically flipped. And we know that exists. It's called Zani-Bekov rotation. And it's part of a larger set of theories that are called the Earth crustal displacement theory, that essentially states that, the Earth, it wobbles and it
yeah,
precesses,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then
It's like a
the
top
magnetic
rotating on a
field,
flat
yeah,
surface.
exactly, the magnetic field flips all of a sudden, and what that causes is the entire earth to just suddenly flip around on its axis, right? And
Yeah,
so what that would cause is extreme winds, it would cause tsunamis. uh, Practically all life on earth, like we're talking about 80 to 90% of life on earth, would be wiped out in a blink of an eye. And we essentially start over from there. And it gets interesting because a lot of people say that the pyramids are proof of that, that they weren't actually built by the ancient Egyptian dynasty, but they actually inherited it. And it's interesting because, again, you just take a look at ancient Egyptian artifacts. The oldest stuff is like you're looking at high tech things, right? The oldest
yeah,
stuff is, it's like, how did you cut that? How did you create a mathematically perfect vase using granite that's perfectly polished? We would struggle to do that with the kind of technology we can do it now. And then
yeah,
as we head towards more modern times, the quality is actually decreasing. So how is that the oldest stuff is the most technologically superior, and the most newest stuff is crap, is utter garbage, right? How does
yeah,
that happen? It only happens if someone inherited something and tried to reproduce it, but they weren't able to quite get that idea. And there's a lot of other interesting evidence. Like, so if you look at the Great Pyramid in Giza, it's got
yeah,
this sort of a semi-lunar wear mark, which actually, if you were to imagine the ocean was high up and just that the top of the pyramid was exposed, it would essentially form a water level, and you would see certain wear marks from the waves, which you see. Then you see this frozen casing, like not frozen, but molten and then re-solidified casing at the bottom, which means that all of this stuff was underwater. It most likely didn't happen because of wind. And mainstream archaeology's refusal to admit, that there is perhaps more there than we understand. And so, again, there's a lot of interesting possibilities, a lot of interesting things happening. And it's also interesting that these ideas are becoming mainstream. Now, what I need to decide, and what I think you need to decide also, and any other reasonable person, is how much of this stuff can we actually believe in? And how much of this stuff is actually just an appeal to bias, it's an appeal to a fallacy, or it's a trick of some kind? That's the
yeah,
hardest question. And that's the answer I'm looking for.
yeah. I mean, it's basically like it is the belief, like you should consider everything and believe nothing so that you can change your thought process and like mend it for the future and the truths.
Exactly, exactly. But then again, the question becomes, at what point do you start to lose credibility because people around you start to think, oh, wow, this guy is like a, closeted kook.
Conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so it's it's an interesting one because I want to talk to people about this. I want to, like, jangle their brains and get them thinking in a certain way as well. But at the same time, I don't want them to start thinking that I've gone cuckoo, because I feel like, where there is smoke, there is fire. It's an observational thing, and
yeah.
you can absolutely have a situation where you have hundreds of people talking about some kind of nonsensical thing that they believe is absolutely true. But it's only when the really
Flat
credible people
earthers.
that you respect, they start talking about this stuff, and you go, okay, what's going on? Like, maybe there's a bigger picture here I'm missing.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you had asked me a year ago and you mentioned something about astral projection, I'd be like, bye, see ya. But
I mean, you
now
should be
I
open to new experiences and theories.
absolutely, absolutely. And I had a sort of an experience as well. I'm not ready to talk about it. And it was an incredible experience. I'll say that. I wasn't afraid or anything. And I haven't been able to explain it. The best I can come up with is perhaps I had a hallucination, but I was definitely not on any hallucinogenics at that point in time. I was in a highly focused state. I guess you could almost call it a flow state. I was in a flow state. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I was transferred into this other place, and this place didn't exist as a solid place. It was a bunch of waves all around me, and I could occupy that space, and there were other people there as well, which I thought was very interesting. And it's something that I've been trying to sort of reproduce in some way or form. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted. But if I
Yeah,
do run
definitely.
into one of your variants in these astral projections, I'll tell them you said hi, and I'll say a
Yeah,
word to
universe is
them.
very vast. I mean, I don't think it would
Well,
be
I mean,
quite
I could
possible.
probably set an intention, right, and potentially
Yeah,
find one of your variants, and we could do an experiment. Now, I'm going to say this to you now. So when I meet your variant, I'm going to say a word or I'm going to say a phrase to your variant that has to be said in a certain way. And so if you run into this variant on your travels and you call me and you go, or you send me a message and you go, I got this message from you through one of my variants, then we'll know that there's perhaps something else going on over here. Maybe a fun little experiment you can try. We should have a control there as well. We'll think about it some more.
Yeah, I mean it would be like very intentional of sorts, and we would have to prepare for at least 6 months, at least.
I don't know about the preparation time.
Because
I know
yeah,
nothing about
because
this, but I'm going to say
these
if I'm successful, I'm going to try that.
yeah, definitely, because these things are very random, and like even I'll tell you, I have experienced that death in my dreams. Basically, there was a time when I was in a like a plain area of sorts, like maybe Paris, in where you have a like tourist place, and someone threw it was an enemy of sorts. Someone threw a very big stone at me, and like it hit me here, and like as it fell down, I was looking at there, and I would actually feel my skull like falling, and then I
Hmm.
would fall, and like it was a very warm, like the temperature rise maybe, and then I fell into sleep basically. So like I
Right.
have experienced multiple sort of
I
deaths.
have similar memories from childhood, where I've had this intense dream. I think like in my previous life, I died in a motorcycling accident. I'm not sure, because
Okay.
like you just mentioned, like I had this dream where I fell off a motorcycle and I saw the road rushing up, and I knew I was going to hit my head, and then obviously like I fell asleep. And then I woke up, and then I was in this world, right? And obviously, I knew that I was in this world, but even as a child, it got me thinking like and I have this really weird pre-birth memory. It's the best I can put it, is that I have this really vivid memory of being in a place before I was born, and this place was vast, expansive. It was technologically advanced. It was futuristic. It was like white walls with sort of ephemeral displays that were ultra high definition, and you're shown everything that's going to happen in your life, the kinds of things that you're going to believe in, the kinds of things that are going to trouble you, and you're given a choice. You're told whether you want this or whether you want that, and we pick whatever we want based on those circumstances. But I was
Yeah.
also told that this is going to be my last time around. And so when I heard about like these like the soul recyclers on the moon and stuff, that immediately reminded me of this. I'm like, what are the chances,
Hmm.
like what are the chances of that? And then I
Yeah,
listened to some
definitely.
people's testimonies of these sort of PBE places, and it sort of matches up with what I was thinking. So again, like I don't know what that is. I don't pretend to
You
know,
should document
but
it,
I
I think.
want to know. I want to
Yeah.
know. I want to know what it is. I want to understand it to the best of my abilities, and then maybe do something useful with it. So, and I think
Yeah,
like
maybe.
that is perhaps better than wasting our time arguing about things that happened in the past or maybe didn't happen in the past, that are still unfortunately causing so much pain and suffering to people who are just like us, right? And it's
Yeah.
just weird, man. We're like the stupidest species ever. Like I swear, the only reason aliens don't talk to us is because they're like, these people are morons. They're gonna pretend to be nice, and then before you know it, they're gonna want to try and invade our planet. It's like, no, we're not gonna
Yeah.
talk to them.
Yeah. And I want to just explain briefly of the first of my astral experiences. Have you first have you like gotten a sudden jerk in the body while you are dreaming, or like
Yeah,
for
yeah,
science?
yeah.
I don't think can explain it uh, right
It's
now.
called
I
a
guess
hypnic jerk. It's called a
yeah.
hypnic jerk.
So, what do they say are the reasons behind it?
So, I mean, from a physiological standpoint, I think it can be very effectively explained by certain sets of neurons shutting down while your prefrontal cortex is still active, right? So, let's say you're falling asleep, but instead of like your prefrontal cortex or your higher executive functions shutting down, those sort of things shutting down, because when you're asleep, when you're in deep sleep, you're essentially paralyzed. right?
Yeah,
That's how your
definitely.
body protects itself, because the derangement of that we call somnambulance, or sleepwalking and that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
if those neurons turn off in a slightly different order, so your higher functions are still active, you're sort of still in that space between asleep and awake, and your motor neurons shut down, well, all of a sudden your sense of proprioception, which is to say how your brain or your understands what physical space your body is occupying, is suddenly gone. And that will manifest itself as a sensation of free fall, or it would manifest as a sensation of a sudden jerk, like you've been jerked awake because something shook you. And it's just your prefrontal cortex going, something's not right. So I think
yeah,
that's how science explains it, but I'm interested to hear what you
yeah.
think it might be
Uh,
happening.
the way you explained it, it may be right, but what I have observed is I only get it when I am dreaming loosely and I trip on something, and then my body reacts like if I am tripping. So, how I feel is the the phantom body thing, in which if
Yeah,
you cut
the
your hand,
phantom limb. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, it is kind of that case when you have traveled in the variant's consciousness and the variant's body, you do have some excess of your body also.
Yeah.
So if you can only observe and not control altogether the variant's body, then, and when it trips, you want to control it, but you have control of your own body, and that's why you you feel that jerk, or
That
like the
physical
body.
sensation of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe
look, it's
maybe
possible.
that's the
It,
explanation.
would you say that perhaps then, okay, how would you differentiate between being in astral travel, astral projection versus just a
Yeah,
lucid dream? Because lucid dreaming is something that I've done.
yeah, lucid dreaming maybe is getting an access of a variance universes where laws of universe are vastly different and manifestation is a million times stronger. Maybe it might be an explanation. And
It could be.
to tell you about that experience, about the actual projection, basically I was working in my dream, and then I had to go in a pool of sorts which was higher than my height. uh, then suddenly I was drowning of sorts, but I was able to breathe because again my body was able to breathe and I was
Yeah.
not actually drowning. Then I was able to differentiate that. Then I have an awareness, basically, like this is the bed and I am sleeping on this, and basically the consciousness resides in this portion of the human body. And then I could like experience this body also. Then uh, the dream version of the body was like this and standing and like slightly
Hmm.
drowning. And
Hmm.
then I've observed, or like that the same thing is basically entangled of sorts, and maybe the pituitary gland was something had to do with it. As soon as I was able to observe this and analyze this and like acknowledge this, I was able to leave both of the bodies. And suddenly that universe is like access got cut off. And uh as soon as like lost the connection with my body, I was floating in my room. And I had a like a question previously, when the Stephen Greer tells me that tells that the in astral projection you are able to see. Then I
Yeah.
used to wonder, how are you able to see if your eyes are in your body and are shut down? But I was able to experience a sort of x-ray vision uh, of my universe. And like I could see behind the wall and etc. I was floating, so I did collide with the wall, but I didn't interact it. I went right through, and I was in the fetus position because it was again first experience. I did not
Hmm.
consciously do it. And then as soon as there was around 5 to 6 seconds of it, seeing the my room and like seeing my body, I was able to travel back. And then like I was awake, then I was like I always do two or three sort of still thoughts so that I can remember what I experienced.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah, that's what happened, and maybe the awareness does it all. And there are this also, and there are also the why people are ignorant. Basically, do tell me if you do agree. There are levels of consciousness, and normal people are maybe at the 3.5 scale, and I am maybe at the 4.5 scale. And among the below 3 or the threes are the ignorant people who just want to like not in a bad way, but want to live a life of an npc and a robot, and they don't question anything and like just go on. And
Interesting.
maybe if you are able to get 5 and 5.5, you are able to go in that states.
So
And
essentially,
maybe the
enlightenment,
yeah, kind
as
of.
it
And
would
maybe the
be. Yeah.
enlightened people, uh, they do a lot, they know a lot of stuff. That's why they are and like experience a lot of stuff. That's why they are in the maybe 7 to 7.5 uh
So it's a scale like out of 10.
yeah, 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 scale. And maybe when you go to a level 10, uh you attain moksha, maybe, which my explanation is you just leave your body and just float in away.
Interesting.
And
So,
uh,
that
yeah,
begs a
yeah,
few
just let
questions.
me complete it. There was also a thought, like E is equal to mc square. So energy is fast moving mass basically. So this piece of mass is basically slow moving energy. So maybe if we are able to achieve light speed,
Well,
we would.
relative to you, it might be slow moving, but relative to an external observer, the Earth is moving at a high rate of speed, along with the solar
Yeah, yeah,
system,
definitely,
along with,
definitely.
yeah,
But I'm talking about the c square, that sort of
yeah,
speed.
yeah, yeah. No, so
So
C square is
so
essentially
maybe
just your constant, right?
mass is energy, but it is very slow. Maybe.
But we know mass is energy because that's exactly what E equals mc squared is telling us. It's telling
Yeah,
us that
yeah, yeah,
energy is equal to mass multiplied by the constant of the universe, which is the speed of light squared, right? And again, like Einstein, he was in two minds because he also recognized the long-term questions that people would have. And so,
yeah,
he discarded his idea of a universal constant, and then he later regretted it, saying that was one of his biggest mistakes, and he was trying to reintegrate it, but unfortunately he couldn't finish his
yeah,
work. And so, if he had, perhaps our understanding of the fabric of space and time in the universe could be a little bit different. But again, if you compare Newtonian gravitation with Einsteinian gravitation, well, Newton tells us that gravity is this fixed force. It arises because of mass. G has a value on Earth. It is 9.8 or 9.11 meters per second squared, right? Okay. But what about space? Why is there no gravity there, even though there are attractors all throughout the universe? Well, we know that light bends because mass exerts this curvature through space and time. So that
yeah,
begs the question, is gravity a fundamental force or is it a derived relative force? Well, the answer to that is it's complicated, but you could clearly say that the only reason we feel acceleration on Earth is because of the mass of the Earth, but it's not just the mass of the Earth, it is the movement of the Earth through the cosmos, which gives us this sense of relative motion, which attracts us to the planet, right? And
yeah,
of course,
definitely.
it bends space and time. So again, extrapolating that, and if you were to say that, okay, we have this tragic speed limit that prevents us from exploring the entire universe, but again, what if, and again, like E equals mc squared tells us that, if you were to take the speed of light and you were to try to approach the speed of light, you would need an infinite amount of energy, but then your mass would also increase proportionally infinitely, and so you would never be able to approach the speed of light. You would never be able to break that fundamental barrier. But again, if electromagnetism is the fundamental force in the universe. If, let's say, the universe comes into existence spontaneously, you just have one particle that's in superposition. It's quantum entangled, and it's sort of just reflecting and bouncing around, and it's creating a whole bunch of other virtual particles as well, which essentially gives rise to this critical mass, which creates gravity. Gravity then acts like the observer, which creates the universe. And humanity just happened to evolve out of nowhere
Yeah,
for whatever reason. and we have this antenna in our brain that some people like to call the pineal gland. And it seems that we may have forgotten how to use it, or perhaps we never really knew how to use it. Perhaps we just scratched the surface and then put all kinds of stories around it. But I think there
Yeah,
is a very interesting question that needs to be answered. And I think that we will be very surprised with the answer that consciousness and reality and physics, all of these things are more intimately related than we ever
yeah,
thought was
definitely.
possible. And I think like that's the difference between enlightenment and potentially just living your life as a normal person. Again, in the absence of information, you could go rationally and you could say that, okay, of all these people, how many people have spontaneously taken samadhi, how many people have spontaneously become enlightened? And so if statistics is real, and we know statistics is real, then people should be just randomly turning into these superluminal beings, but they're not, at least that we know of. So
Yeah,
you have to be careful with this, right? Like you have to be very, very careful that you don't cross into the realm of Alex Jones and other kinds of conspiracy
yeah,
theory.
yeah, yeah,
And it's for the sake of your reputation as well. And but at the same time, I think it's valuable to have an open mind. I think it's valuable to not be dismissive of things outright, but at the same time not be afraid to call out a piece of shit as a piece of shit when it has to be called out. There's no point in
yeah,
calling it out,
definitely.
and
Yeah,
that's a bit of a risk, unfortunately, that we're sort of flirting with danger, but I like it. It's fine.
yeah. I mean, it's all right. It's no issue. You have to like to understand everything. You have to have a drop of madness also.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
but
you do.
but
I think
do
madness
do
is
comment on the
critical.
the astral experience which I told.
Look, I definitely want to explore this more. Like I said, I've been getting interested in this stuff. So I recently was looking into remote viewing as well.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm anywhere close to practicing it with any kind of reliability, but what I can do every night is spend half an hour, 45 minutes just before I fall asleep, just listening to the Gateway Experience tapes, and seeing if I can achieve anything from there. And I'll report back to you. I'll let you know how that goes. It's only been, excuse me, 1 week that I've actually started doing it, and I wasn't being very consistent. But I'm hopeful. I'm also excited and also a little bit trepidatious. But I think it is interesting. I think that there are things. I have a few friends. I'm not going to say who or what, and
yeah,
they're kind of into psychedelics. And one person, well, two people I know, they're really into ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is like this
yeah. I
South
have heard a
American
lot
healer.
about it.
Yeah,
I'm also
the,
into
the
it, but not experienced it.
yeah, neither have I. But the trick to it is apparently so ayahuasca is essentially DMT, which is an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dimethyltryptamine or something like that. And they mix that with a vine, a specific plant that naturally produces monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Because when you consume DMT, it's metabolized within 10 or 15 minutes. And so the way people just consume DMT is by smoking it. And apparently, from what I hear, it's a very horrible experience because when you burn it or when you melt that thing, it tastes like horrible plastic, like you're inhaling a molten plastic bag. And so this one guy I know,
You also drink it, right?
sorry, well, that's
Drink.
ayahuasca. If you drink
Okay,
DMT,
okay.
it's not going to do anything. And the reason why ayahuasca works is because of that vine, because of the MAO inhibitor, right? Anyway, so a few people I know, like there's this one guy, he used to work in the Australian Defense Forces, and when he retired and whatever, I'm convinced he's a spy. And he was talking about his DMT experiences, and what he told me was that when he smoked it, like within a few seconds of consuming it, his thought was, "Oh my God, what the fuck have I done?" Because it hit him like a train, and he was suddenly transported. Like he said, I was blasted off into another universe, and he met entities. Right? He met
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
creatures. He says, like, I was only out for 15 minutes, but because the substance causes time dilation, I felt like I was there for like a day or more and just talking with these entities and whatever, whatever. Then I spoke to another friend who has no relation with this other guy who also said, "Oh, bro, I tried DMT. It was so trippy. It was so weird." I'm like, "What does it feel like?" He's like, "It changes you." I'm like, how?
Yeah,
And he's like, well, it could be good, it could be bad. I had a good trip. And then I asked him, and he started talking about entities too. And what he described was very similar to what this other guy described. So I went
yeah, definitely.
online and I looked at other people's experiences, and they're all talking about these same bloody entities. And it makes you wonder, One guy is Australian, the other guy was South American. This dude is American, that guy is Indian, that guy is Arab or whatever, and they're all talking about these same entities. So it's certainly not something from their childhood. It's definitely not something from their upbringing. So what the heck are
Yeah.
these things? And no one has a straight answer. Like medical science doesn't have an answer for
Yeah, I
you.
mean, there was a podcast. There was a person talking about this in the Joron experience, and he was talking about the research which a college did about like giving DMT through drip and keeping that experience
Oh,
for like
keeping them. Yeah,
12.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh shit! Yeah, I think I
And
remember
they
reading
basically
about this one.
had wanted to map out this entities uh, plane. I mean, it is interesting for me. And I mean, all the psychedelics and the these things, if you are observant enough, I think they would reveal you many things, because they does change certain chemistries and like experiences. And after all, this is all are all about experiences, and the
Absolutely.
which are due to the chemical balances in the brain. And there was
Yes.
a uh, Krishna something. So yeah, Sudarshan Kriya. So it is basically a breathing technique, the due to which I think, I have not searched it recently, but the DMT is produced naturally in the
In the
brain.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pineal
it
gland again,
is
apparently, from what I
it
hear.
is very potent if you are doing it uh like very fast breathing and like very very deep breathing. I have done it. I have not gotten that amounts of experience, but you do get to have the tingling experience when you do this breathing technique, and you are all suddenly very cold.
Yeah.
And that's the tingling experience also when I had when I did some weed some days, yeah, some years back.
Yeah, look, I think weed unfortunately has a really bad stigma in India, whereas in the West it's become accepted as medication now. So, like,
Yeah,
in Australia, you can get a prescription for medical marijuana, and you could
and
actually
in
stand
India
outside in front of a police
it
station and
is
smoke a doobie. And
it
if a
is
cop comes out
okay
and says, "Yeah, I've
to.
got a prescription, you can't stop me from
Yeah, yeah,
having
yeah,
my
yeah. I
medication."
have seen the stand-ups around it. It is like acceptable to drink and eat it. It is not acceptable to smoke it. The
Ah,
bhang
well.
thing.
Well, I mean, bhang is essentially just the flowering part of the weed plant.
No,
It's
no, no.
essentially
It is
marijuana.
the leaf. The flowering is marijuana and weed.
No, no, no.
The ma-
So the flower part, we call it the flower, but no one actually consumes the flower. It's just the leaves and the stems and all of these things that contain the highest amount of THC and CBD, which is cannabidiol. And human beings have cannabidiol receptors for whatever reason. Yeah, we produce endocannabinoids ourselves. Our body produces them, and so there's
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
distinction. But what's more interesting, and I actually tried psilocybin a couple of years ago,
Okay.
and I thought it was absolutely interesting. But what I remembered was this was not actually the first time I had psilocybin. The first time I had psilocybin or magic mushrooms was when I was a kid. I was actually 4 years old. And we used to live in Nagpur, and I had cousins who lived around me. And there were a lot of empty plots where we lived, and
Yeah,
we would
yeah,
go out in the afternoons and whatever. And one day, I think it was my cousin's sister. She found this mushroom that was really weird, and we were playing around with it. And if you pick it up and if you touch it, it bruised and it turned this vibrant blue, and we had all of this blue goop on our fingers and whatever. Obviously, we started tripping balls. And so, as a kid, I had no idea what the hell was happening to me. I was a bit scared. I was a bit weird, but I
yeah,
wasn't. I wasn't like acting out or anything. No one could figure out what was happening until my mom asked me to eat, and I wouldn't eat. And I kept on staring at the sky because all of the clouds, they looked like pixelated squares. Everything was pink in color. It was weird, man. And then I fell asleep, and and then like the next day, everyone was talking about poisoning, and my mom was like, "Yeah, don't go out with your cousins anymore. Like, don't touch it and whatever, whatever." So I got really badly lectured. Obviously, then conditioning kicks in, and being a good little boy is like, "Oh, say no to drugs. Don't ever do this. Don't ever do that." Never tried any of these things. But then I came across a couple of interesting articles. I came across a friend who was suffering from depression, who took magic mushrooms and then recovered. And he happens
Yeah.
to be a psychologist. And I was going through some stuff at that point in time. And he's like, Mo, I can recommend you try this. I'm like, dude, I've never tried this before. I don't know what to think. I don't want to, like, end up brain damaged or whatever. And he started laughing at me. Then he comes over to my place one day where we decided, and he brought over some substances, and he's like, "Yeah, have some of this," and then he took me out for a walk, and man, like, I felt a tingling sensation go through my body, and like you described, I was suddenly very cold, and we were out in the park. And someone was playing some music on the speaker, and I'm just sitting back and I'm looking at the clouds. And in time with the beats, the clouds started dancing and moving around. Like, it was weird, man. But the overall sensation was that I felt very connected. I felt very loved. I felt very warm and comfortable. And the one thing that happened was that I suddenly had no ego left, right? And so when
I
the
go
trip
that.
ended, yeah, well, I didn't actually have ego death, but I couldn't feel that ego, that filter that exists within the
Okay,
brain,
okay.
right? The default mode network got suppressed. And then afterwards, I journaled my experiences and whatever. My mood was great. I felt wonderful. Whatever feelings of depression I had, they were gone. And I kind of had an idea of what I needed to do. It's almost like I came out a new person on the other end, right? And I thought that was incredibly valuable. And it obviously made me even more curious, like, what is this stuff? What is happening?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if something can change your mind so quickly and help you sort of become a better person, why did we end up outlawing these things? You know, like, what
Yeah,
is it
definitely.
that caused people to outlaw it? And if you look at traditional Indian culture, marijuana is a huge part of our culture. It's part of the faith. It's part of the beliefs, the worship of Shiva and everything. And obviously the
Yeah.
fact that we consume it as part of holy festivities as well. It's a socially acceptable intoxicant in those circumstances. And there is some very weak evidence to also suggest that the secret ingredient in the mysterious somras was a species of psilocybe muscarinea or something like that. And if you read the translations of the Vedic descriptions of somras, it talks about how you emerge as a new man. And I thought that was fascinating, man. And it makes me wonder, like, was it outlawed so as to keep it away from the vast majority of people, to keep them compliant? And then this is where things start to fall into the whole conspiracy theory aspect of things. But as a former healthcare practitioner, as someone who believes in trying to help humanity and people, I will suggest that if you're struggling with mental health issues, and provided that there is nothing else that is a big contraindication, that people should give psychedelic therapy its due and consider it as a form of valid treatment.
Yeah, I mean, there is a thing also which is bad, and basically why the bad trips happen, or afterwards the experience is very bad. When you do these type of things, or the breathing techniques also, you are open up to a lot of truths basically. And if you do see ignorant people around you afterwards in your environment, you are sort of depressed, and it's basically the long term effects of these things. And I mean, if you can get a acceptable environment around this, maybe then it can help very much. And basically
Absolutely,
the natural
absolutely.
natural things also. Have
But
you heard about?
I think that
Yeah,
psychedelic therapy is going to be a revolution in mental health care. I think it's going to
yeah,
absolutely
definitely.
revolutionize things. So the hard part is convincing people that you should try something that people have told you throughout your life that you should never try. I will also say this: if someone comes up to me and go, "I want to try crystal meth, I want to have cocaine," I'm probably going to slap that person on the side of the head and go, like, "Stay away from that shit. You want to try something that's genuinely helpful. Don't try all of that nonsensical stuff."
Yeah, that sort of things are very very much potent in the way that they do fry up the brain dopamine receptors, and like then it's not good. Maybe
It's
a
not
very
worth it.
very weakened version of that would be acceptable someday.
Yeah, in my opinion, the only legitimate use that you have for opioids and other synthetic sort of, I guess, narcotic substances or psychoactive substances is purely in the medical realm. I don't
Yeah,
think that the consumption of cocaine or whatever, or crystal meth or any of these substances enhances you or makes you a better person.
yeah,
I don't think
definitely.
it does, because the other thing is, like with magic mushrooms, like I had that one trip, it was brilliant. I don't have any desire to try them ever again. I don't know,
Yeah,
like
that's the
that
thing.
might
It
change
it
after some
shouldn't be
time.
addictive.
It's not. See, that's the thing. It's not something that you can like. Oh, I'm bored. I think I'm just gonna eat some magic mushrooms. Like, no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not that.
That's the why things become addictive is we want to chase an experience and just run away from our reality. That's why the phones are also like the real stuff is very addictive right now, because we
I
can
agree.
just open it and load our dopamine receptors and be bored and be what does it matter.
I swear, man, like this thing is ruining my life. I hate phones. Like I love them, but I hate them. I love them for the technology aspect of it, but I honestly wish that there was a way, and I'm gonna try this, is like, like step away from these things a lot more. Nothing good can come of it, I think. Nothing good can come
Yeah,
of it.
definitely. uh
We're over 2 hours. It's been
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah,
fun talking to you.
yeah,
I think we
it's
should do this again
it,
soon.
we should, but I don't know when I will be free next. But if you want to do this conversation more, we can do it.
I think let's maybe put a month or so in between, and let's see what happens in the coming weekend. They're making a lot of promises about disclosure that's going to start on this
Yeah,
weekend. Stephen Greer, Ross Coulthard, all these people. I think like if something comes out of that, that can make for some good conversational fodder. But at the same time, I'm also going to try the gateway experience. I'm going to see if I can
yeah, yeah, yeah.
try astral projection, and if I
Yeah,
can, I
do
would love to
document
talk
the,
about it with you. Yeah, yeah,
do
definitely. And I'd love
document
to
this.
talk about
Yeah,
it, because
yeah,
again, like
definitely.
I have no desire to keep this to myself. Like if I had a genuine experience, I'll report it the way I saw it, minus whatever I think about it. And we'll see what other people might have to think about it as well. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying I lack information and I want to find out. I'm
Yeah,
curious. So
definitely.
let's see if I can get my brain from -5 to maybe 4. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't know how much I will be free next month. Basically, next month is chasing experiences and backpacking throughout. February is basically 4 months, 4 weeks. So
So
two
no
of the
pressure,
weeks
man.
I
Like,
will be.
we could
Yeah,
just
yeah,
give me a regular call. Like, we don't even have to like record a podcast episode or whatever. But I think it would be fun to just sort of compare notes and see what's actually happening.
yeah. In the podcasting thing, I want to do conversations like we are having right now and get sort of enough material to just continue it for
Yeah, I totally
maybe,
get that,
yeah,
man.
3 4 4 hours maybe. It
Yeah,
would
look,
be like,
I could probably keep going, but I'm actually getting a little bit tired now. But I think if
yeah,
we
me
do
too.
this
I am
again in a
also.
few months, I think we can
Yeah,
have an even longer conversation. In fact, next time, like I could queue up some material and I could sort of share that the more complex
yeah,
ideas
yeah,
that
yeah.
we talk about, maybe our viewers can gain some,
Yeah,
your
maybe we
viewers can
can go
gain
in
some
depth
experience from that.
with this the disclosure thing also maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I think it could be fun. I think it could be a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Well, thanks again,
So
man. I thought this was great.
yeah, I mean, it is what I do, and I'm trying to do right now to just basically make a space for these type of conversations.
I'm in. I think it's fascinating. I've been looking for people to talk to about this kind of stuff, so it's good to be able to do that. Paul's great,
Look long
but
enough.
he's like, "Oh, Mo, you're talking pseudoscience," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's fun."
Yeah, I'm talking with him next tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Yeah.
Nice, nice, excellent, man.
Uh, yeah. So ending remarks. So uh, basically you are a nerd interesting in a lot of things. Talk about it and high openness and maybe agreeableness. So how do you think the thing which you are doing right now can other people can do it on their own?
I
What
think
are the basis
um, I think the basis
basics?
is simply be curious.
Yeah.
Ask
How to be
why.
curious? I mean,
Just ask
for
why.
a ignorant.
Ask
Okay,
why. I think everything starts with that simple question: why? Why does this happen? And if you are genuinely interested in understanding why, then you start to learn a few things. From those few things, they show you the possibility that perhaps there's other interesting rabbit holes you can go down. And it's just a matter of giving yourself permission and the time to actually explore that. Form some ideas. They could be kind of crazy ideas. Talk to someone. Maybe someone will laugh at you,
definitely.
right? Maybe someone will agree with you. If someone's agreeing with you, then that should be, a sort of a checkpoint that, okay, I am influencing someone. So I need to be sure that what I'm saying is correct, that I'm not misleading them. So I will say I'm doing this to the best of my abilities or to the best of my understanding, and I would pepper it with some warnings and cautions. Similarly, if someone laughs at me because of my ideas, now I could choose to be convinced that my idea is correct and they are wrong, but that would be extremely arrogant. I would say the better path would be to understand why they are saying that it is not what you think it is, and then sort of recalibrating yourself. And if you think you know something different, then perhaps you can find a different way to answer that, or perhaps approach it in a different way. But the question is, why even become curious about anything? There are many reasons, right? And depending on your circumstance, it could be, do or die. It could be because you're interested in something. And I think the crux, the core of all of that is, when we become too comfortable, we stagnate. When we are a little
Yeah,
bit uncomfortable, we give ourselves just the right amount of stress needed to move forward. The act of moving forward is essentially trying something different, and again, trying to answer that question, why. That is the most important thing, in my opinion. And so people find me very irritating, because like they'll say something and I'll be like, why? They'll be talking about their guru or whatever, and they'll talk about this timeline that doesn't make any sense, and my question will be, why? And I end up irritating people, right? But I think it also keeps me safe. It keeps me sane, because it allows me to filter ideas and things that I can reject, and there are ideas that I can hold on to, and there are other ideas that I can integrate, right? And how we
okay.
find that balance, that's the hard one. But it's always ask the question why. Don't settle for, oh, just because the sky is so high. No, 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 no. The sky isn't high. We're down here, right? You have to ask that question why, and try your best to answer it. When people say, don't use your brain, you think too much, I don't respect those people,
Yeah,
right? From a philosophical perspective, you are definitely more than your body. You are perhaps more than your mind. But as an individual with agency and supposed free will, well, if you shut your brain down, then you're nothing. You're a vegetable. Perhaps a vegetable has more purpose than you do. So
yeah,
never trust people who say don't think too much. Yeah, overthinking is different from thinking too much. And
yeah,
never settle for people who say something is just cannot be answered. Well, maybe they can't be right now, but if you keep asking why, then maybe we'll think of a new way of answering it.
yeah. I mean, understanding about yourself, how you behave, why you behave, and then asking why to understand the exterior world also. Like it would
Absolutely.
do
And even for
wonders in the
yourself,
long term. Yeah.
even for yourself, like, why am I depressed? Why am I sad? Why am I feeling so happy? Why am I so angry? And you might not be able to answer that right away, but if you spend any amount of time introspecting, being meditative or whatever, you will invariably remember things that you did or you said. And from a purely personal perspective, I reassess. I go, no, what I did was wrong. I hurt someone, I caused someone pain. And then I will try and look for a way to either make amends, but more importantly, learn the lesson that needed to be learned and try and do better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I think I am able to maybe get my body's memories when I am like in the
It's so
dreams maybe.
fascinating, man. Like, I honestly, I'm so curious. Like, I want to try this. I want to see if I can meet another version of me, and maybe like ask a bunch of questions, or probe their memories or whatever, or even just meet an alien and go, "Hey,
Not
can you show me the
meet.
soul recycler on the moon?"
Yeah, and,
I want to see
not
how
meet,
that
but
thing
yeah,
works.
but being in their body and like experiencing the world. And I also there was a thing like people say you don't use phones. I have not like extensively, but I have used some a bit of phone like googling on the other universes. And like I have not seen stars, I have not asked facts about it. But because if you do begin to do the higher order thinking, you tend to like get awake.
Yeah.
And but I have seen mirrors in and it was very glitchy. I don't know why, maybe it's the laws of their universes. But like I want to experiment and like uh do things on that universe. Like how do I things in mine, because there was a friend of mine who fainted and he told me he was riding on horses. And then I get to an idea, maybe what if we can go in a month's uh, induced coma, how would we experience stuff?
It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. But you know, like people who wake up from comas, who have the NDEs, near death experiences, they talk about a lot of things. You know, like they'll talk about this warm light, and their relatives are all there, and people are telling them. And there's a shocking amount of commonality there as well, where people talk about how they were told that it's not their time, and then they wake up from their coma and they come back, and all of their cancers are gone or whatever. So a lot of interesting possibilities. Science has, asked the question why, but never been able to come up with an answer. And part of that is, of
Yeah,
course, the ridicule that comes with proposing something outlandish. Like so many people have lost their careers as a result of it. And so, again, I don't think that there is an international conspiracy at play, that some people are trying to control information, but I could be wrong. Because again, the CIA reading room is a bloody mystery. Like, why would you classify this and then declassify it, right? And they're not going to tell us why. So that still opens the possibility that perhaps people decided that, hey, we're going to keep a bunch of things out of mainstream science. We're going to keep that as a form of esoteric science that occurs in the basement of the Pentagon or Area 51. And the rest is up to you. And again, like if it were that simple, if anti-gravity was that simple, do you really think that the government of India wouldn't have anti-gravity spacecraft? Do you really think that the Germans, the Japanese, the British wouldn't, and only the CIA would stumble upon it? What's stopping the Russians from having that kind of technology? So, like when you think about the why, you sort of get the answer, but it's still fascinating, and I still say that it's worth another look.
yeah, definitely. And I just remembered an experience I would tell in brief. Basically, when you are awake in the paralysis state, when you sleep, there is a time in which I was aware enough to control my involuntary uh, muscles, basically. So I was, uh, how I understand it right now, I was able to control the beats of my heart. And I have done it multiple 10ish times. uh, when I try to slow it down, basically my whole body starts to cramp, and I start to like uh, a breathlessness state of sorts whenever I do it. And I think, and I what I observe, and how I am observe it is basically, if I am able to do it for a longer period of time, I might be able to consciously stop my heart. And that's maybe what the rishis do when they take the samadhi. I mean, I don't know, but I am just connecting the dots. And
I mean, look, it is possible with enough practice potentially, because you do have the vagus nerve which runs down this way, and you can control it with breathing. So you can control the synapses in those afferent fibers. But uh, again, like if your heart stops beating and if you become hypoxic, well, you're gonna die.
yeah,
So don't
definitely.
die. Be careful. Otherwise, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, I mean, it is an experience of sorts in 1 or 2 seconds, but then I do feel it is dangerous, so I just
Yeah,
leave
I
it.
think probably not try and convince your heart to stop beating, because as far as I understand, medical science is a one-way trip.
Yeah, I mean, then I do understand how am I able to get the control if I am actually doing what I am saying.
Yeah, look, again, I'm not saying that it's probably not possible. We know for a
Yeah,
fact that people who are found in hypothermic states. So a lot of doctors, especially in the emergency rooms and trauma, who have experience with this stuff will tell you that I will never declare a patient dead unless if they are cold and dead on my table, like brought in
Yeah.
from the ice or whatever. I will have to warm them up, try to resuscitate them. And if I still am not able to resuscitate them after they have achieved room temperature or the normal body temperature and they're still not alive, well, that's when I can call them dead. Because, people, there have been several well documented cases where people have,
Medical deaths
passed
and
out in
actual
hypothermia. Yeah,
deaths.
like, 2 days,
Yeah,
three
yeah,
days, their heart has stopped, their lips are blue, whatever. They're brought to the emergency room, they thaw out, and their heart spontaneously starts beating again, and they have no brain damage. Right? There have been a few cases like that, and again, what that points to is that given our current state of understanding, and we do this with people, right? Like, let's say you want to do a heart transplant or many kinds of surgeries, they
yeah,
induce a state of hypothermia. Like they'll cut open your chest cavity and they'll fill you full of ice, and there'll be cooling pads and things, and what they're trying to do is get your heart rate down so low that they can then perform vascular surgery or perform surgeries on your aorta. Otherwise, you would normally just bleed to death with 6 foot tall squirts of blood
yeah,
coming out,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so medical science is able to do that. But that point in time, like you're talking about a yogi and stuff, or a rishi taking samadhi,
Yeah,
the
they're just
one common thing that I see is
speculation right
that they're
now.
all high
Yeah,
altitude in extremely cold places.
yeah,
So maybe
definitely.
that's the trick, right? Maybe that's the trick. Maybe what they're doing is putting themselves in a state of hibernation or suspended animation of some kind. And it's probably not very reliable unless you have like a team of EMTs to resuscitate you and revive you.
Yeah.
But maybe that is what we understand as samadhi, mahasamadhi, but may not actually have
Samadhi is just
anything to do.
consciously dying and like leaving the body behind.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But again, like it opens up some very interesting possibilities and probabilities.
Yeah.
Because if you consider Abrahamic religions or other religions, the act of killing yourself is one of those unforgivable sins, right? And so, how would that not be considered a form of suicide? And so, how would that work, right?
Maybe
It's
suicide
interesting.
is a done on the physical body. I mean, if you do it mentally, it's no issue.
Yeah, so but again, like, yes, and this is where we have to be incredibly careful, is because,
Yeah,
apart
definitely.
from some anecdotal things, no one has ever died and come back and given us an experience report of what the death process was like. And some people claim that they have, but again, there is no consensus on it.
Yeah,
Even though
definitely.
consensus might exist in terms of the kinds of experiences people go through, um, we can't do it at will. So I think understanding the nature of consciousness is the first step in trying to unlock what could potentially happen after we die.
Yeah.
But if quantum entanglement does occur in our brain, and if that's how we are conscious, then that actually paves a way forward for your essence to survive without a physical body as pure energy.
Yeah,
Who
definitely.
knows? It could even be a part of our life cycle. We just don't know it. Like a caterpillar goes into a cocoon and metamorphosizes into a butterfly. Until the point that it emerges from its cocoon, it's never flown before. And all of a sudden, it has these beautiful wings and it knows exactly what to do. And it goes out and it does the things that it needs to do. And what if the physical form for human beings or other forms of life is essentially the first stage in our development? Death is the equivalent of going into a cocoon, and you existing as an ethereal ball of energy is you
Yeah,
turning into a
maybe.
butterfly. So you don't know. It's
Yeah, and
not
why the
impossible. It's also not improbable.
yeah, and why people say the you may be an old soul is because when we die, we do carry some essence of the memories and like
Perhaps,
experiences with us.
perhaps we do. Perhaps we don't. But that's what this phase of discovery is for me. That's
Yeah,
what it's about.
definitely. Yeah, I guess we can go on and on, but I think we should stop it. And it is the longest conversation, 2.5 hours uh, till now. Uh, Talking about like again ending of this. Any questions for me or like this podcasting style maybe, or like you want to share how you want to do in terms of the future goals as
I
such?
really like your style. I think it's kind of becoming the standard for video podcasts, from what I can tell. I like how you approach these things. I like how, you're open minded. You're a scientifically minded person, but you're also definitely a seeker of some kind. And you're looking for, I think, answers beyond the standard. And I think, from what I gather is that you're also a very ambitious person, and I like that. I really do. And I hope to see you grow. Both as a communicator, as a podcaster, vary your style, try to approach different topics as well. And I really think that, this new age of podcasting where we become the content creators rather than just simply consumers at the end of the day is going to be important in terms of potentially finding new ways of doing things, finding new ways of collaborating, potentially finding answers to some vexing questions in perhaps very imaginative ways. And so, again, I would say keep up what you're doing. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we have a chance in the future that you'll have me on your podcast again,
Yeah, we'll
and
definitely
perhaps we
do.
can
Maybe
talk about
maybe
some more
10,
crazy things.
10 to 15 times in the coming 5 to 10 years.
Oh, I
Maybe.
love it, man. Let's do it. I think it'll be fun. I would love to
Yeah.
see you turn into like the Joe Rogan of India, but definitely don't do what some of the other podcasters have been doing. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm trying
there's
to
a
do
limit,
that
like
only.
open-mindedness and then
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
being a dumbass. Like, there's a fine line.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's the whole motto behind this Vartalap. Just curious
excellent, man.
conversations.
Excellent. I can't wait. I can't wait. And also, I hope you have a wonderful backpacking trip. I hope you have awesome adventures in I think the Kumbh Mela, Varanasi, and wherever you're
Yeah, yeah,
going.
yeah.
And I'd love to see what you get up to, and hopefully, maybe we can talk about some of your experiences from those trips.
Yeah, the fun part about that trip is right after doing that Kumbh Mela and Varanasi thing, I will be going in 10 days Vipassana.
Oh wow!
So we
Okay, dude,
and
definitely read up on the
if
gateway process.
yeah, and if the things align right after, then I will go on in Rishikesh and do some bungee jumping. So we'll see how it turn out.
Nice, excellent, man. All the best to you. Before bungee jumping, make sure you inspect the cables and everything. Safety
Yeah,
is
yeah,
super
definitely,
important.
definitely.
And please do definitely look up the gateway experience. See if you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
take some
I'll
of that with you into your vipassana, and who knows, you might actually find something
transcend.
absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I don't want to transcend right now. I mean,
Well, no,
I would miss on the
don't go there
conversations.
permanently, but bring back some fancy technology from another dimension,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
awesome.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Any things you wanna criticize or like point out in which
No,
I
I
am very
have no
bad at right
criticism,
now?
man.
Or
I have no
I mean,
criticism. This
do
is
please
like my
do. I
first
mean,
proper
then I
podcast.
can use that opportunity to like make it better.
I think you just okay. If you're gonna force me, I will just say smile more. You have a nice smile. You start off very seriously. I think like start off a little bit more. Use your expressions to your advantage. Definitely look up some of the legendary interviewers. Right.
Yeah.
I know there's this guy in India, Karan Thapar. A lot of people hate him, but he definitely has a very incisive style. He knows how to poke and prod people. I think those are good skills to have, not just from a podcasting perspective, but even from a general societal perspective and potentially future career options. So definitely keep growing your style. Don't settle on any one style. It's okay to copy some styles for a while. That's how we find our own unique voice, and I think that's the most
Yeah,
important
it's
thing. And
an
I think you'll get
process
there.
of evolution, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, definitely smile more. You have a nice smile. Don't start off so serious. Definitely do become serious when required. But yeah, smile more.
Yeah, yeah. I
Thanks again,
mean,
Yash. This has been great.
on that note, we can end it. I'll
Yeah,
pause the recording real quick.
sure.
Yeah. So that's the episode
Thank you
24th,
again.
42nd episode of Vārtalāap.
Awesome, man. Awesome. When are you going to publish it?
I'll see. I don't have a date right now. Maybe in
Okay.
upcoming 2 weeks.
Send me a
Yeah.
link when you do publish it. I'd love to forward this to a few people and see what they
Yeah,
think.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. I'll stop the recording. Bye.
All right.